Okay, so let's formally move into the public session. Remind everybody that it's being recorded, of course. And we're a little behind time, but I think we're okay. Just under general business, the first item, of course, is approval of the minutes from our December meeting. Were there any comments or changes or amendments? I just had one observation, which I think Chris is just, or Leon, is a typo on page 2 under construction update. So 1, 2, 3, the fourth sentence, you're talking about 1,000 cubic meters of soil each work. I think it should say each week. Other than that, I didn't see anything.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Okay, no changes. I have a motion to approve from someone, please. Looks like Eric is the lucky person. Seconder. I think Peter. Okay. Okay, day's agenda, any, just 2 items, but we do have some conflict declarations. We may as well formally record them. So I believe, Eric, you had mentioned.
That's correct. I have a conflict on the first item and will recuse myself.
Okay. Any other conflicts on the 2 items?
Did Pat make it back on the call?
Yeah, I have a conflict with the second item, so I will recuse myself.
Okay. Okay, thank you. No other conflicts?
And Claude is not attending.
Right.
Otherwise, he would declare a conflict on Leslie Lookout, obviously, too. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, Chris, report back on last month's projects.
All right. Leon, can you, whoops, I think I just let someone in by accident. Leon, can you put my slides up?
I'm
going to try to be quick since we're about to start.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. You want to go to the next slide, please, Leon?
Yep.
So just to review projects that came last time. So 1 to 7 Young, phases 4 and 5. We did give non-support to the above grade pedestrian bridge public realm in the building base. Though we did give conditional support for the massing. I'm not exactly sure when this is coming back, but I believe the city is hoping to bring it back. Next slide, please. It's a private development site, so it's not a public stream. Portland's flood protection. You guys had a lot of interesting technical questions on this last time, and unfortunately I could not get David Kay's schedule to work with today's presentation, but next month David is going to come and give a kind of technical presentation to you on the construction process, and you'll have an opportunity to ask him whatever questions you want, and hopefully he'll be able to answer them. But it is moving along. The liner continues to be installed, and we're now starting to pile dirt on top of the liner. So progress continues. Next slide, please. Just wanted to note that Pat's stormwater facility was listed in a recent Azure magazine of the 10 striking architecture projects shaping design in 2021. So congrats, Pat. We're very proud to have one of our infrastructure buildings get recognized, not to mention one of our panel members.
Pretty cool.
Next slide. And next month's agenda is looking pretty light so far. Queens Quay East, streetscape, schematic design, and tentatively 11 Bay, assuming it makes enough progress that the city's comfortable for it to come back. And appears to be nothing on the waiting list at the moment. So an unusual lull in our otherwise busy agenda. So I think that's it for my report. Is there anything else, Leon?
Nope, that's it. I think we will pass it on to Shannon.
Great. Thanks, Leon. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, sorry, Leon, I just lost the, are you still sharing the slides?
Yes, I'm gonna bring it up in a second. Just opening up that PowerPoint file. Sorry, the PDF file. Just give me 1 second. Just switching it to a different file.
So maybe while Leon's bringing that slide up, as Chris mentioned, we wanted to bring this back to the panel as an update. It's been a while since we talked about the Portlands and the roads specifically, but we have talked about them a lot. So we thought it was important to come back and just give you an update on where we sit. We are moving through the process right now to delete the BRT from the right of way, and right now we're at approximately the 60% design phase. As a reminder, thanks Leon, the three streets that we're talking about in the Portlands here are New Cherry Street, Commissioner Street, and the Dawn Roadway. Although the BRT or the TTC right of way is only located on Cherry Street and Commissioner Street. So the changes that we'll be reviewing this afternoon are just related to Cherry Street and Commissioner Street. You want to move to the next slide, please, Leon? Thanks. So if you recall, we have a vision for each of these three streets and a slightly different character for each of them. Again, focusing on Cherry Street and Commissioner Street for this afternoon. Cherry Street is the gateway to the Portlands, really, and will have a much more urban character than Commissioner Street, which is adjacent to River Park North along its Commissioner Street south boundary and River Park North's north boundary. And so that piece we really wanted to pull the park across and into the right of way as much as possible. If we move to the next slide. So as I said, we want to be very surgical about this design optimization, and wanted to limit the changes that we have to make to the design drawings because we have advanced, we already have 100% design drawings that are approved by the city. And in fact, a contractor that has tendered this work. So Leon, oh, there we go. Okay. Just take
Sorry,
a
it's
few.
very slow. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a big file. It tends to lag a little bit. So on Cherry Street, just to highlight again some of the changes, you'll notice that along the northern or the top side, really, it's the eastern boundary of Cherry Street. You'll see those red markings. That's in the BRT in the TTC right of way. So what we're doing is removing that asphalt paving, essentially leaving all the curbs and other streetscape elements where they are as much as possible, and replacing it with a meadow planting that will use the same species as we've already specified in some of the seed mixes within the right of way. So focus on pollinator species, as I said, and native species like yarrow and black-eyed Susan, and goldenrods, lemon balm, etc. So the biggest change is, of course, that now we have to accommodate buses in mixed traffic, and so there are bus stops that we need to add to the streetscape along its length, and that's where we have some minor changes that we have to make in order to accommodate those buses in the interim.
Shannon, I'm trying to move on to the next slide here. I think I'm
Okay.
gonna stay in just window mode. It's very slow. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to open this on a different application.
Would it be helpful if I tried to share it, Leon? I don't know if that.
Sure. If it's faster on your computer.
I can't make any promises that it will be any faster on my computer. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So moving on to Commissioner Street again. The BRT was on the southern boundary of the right of way, and again a reminder, because we weren't putting in the second LRT bridge over the river, the corridor actually terminated before it crossed the river in that condition in any event. So you'll see that it dekes here back into mixed traffic. So the deletion of a busway really only affects 5 or 6 blocks of traffic on these 2 streets. So again, in the interim condition here, we've had to extend the sidewalks across to the sidewalk, which is right adjacent to the parks on the south side. And the rest of the corridor is a softscape until the LRT is implemented in the future. So those connections you can see, and then also the bus stops that we've added. Again, all in the same language as we've already discussed with you and have reviewed with TTC and with the city transportation groups and urban design as well. Yeah, I can. So in section view, just to give you an idea of what this deletion will look like. Again, the busway here on the top section, and then in the interim condition before the LRT is developed, a meadow planting and minimizing as much as possible the changes to the right of way. And understanding, of course, that when the LRT is developed, as it would have been the case in any event, that there will be some disruption to this corridor because of construction. I know one of the areas that we talked about quite a bit through our review process was this intersection, the intersection of Cherry Street and Commissioners. So again, as a reminder of what that used to look like with the busway, very complicated, very wide. And in fact, the changes here simplify it from a geometric perspective in the interim. So there will be a bus stop that's incorporated here, and a little bit more of a sort of a straightforward bicycle crossing in the interim here as well. And these changes also have been reviewed with TTC, so that the ultimate condition with the LRT is also anticipated, and all of the geometry that's required for that future LRT is being protected for as well. At Commissioner Street and Munition Street, again, just a little bit more of a zoom in to show you where things have changed a bit. Again, here in the top, the section with the BRT in place, which was the last version that the panel has seen. And then in this bottom version, the meadow replaces the BRT corridor. And again, some hardscaping has to be extended across the right-of-way, the TTC right-of-way, to make that connection in the interim to the park. Lastly, an update specifically to the mid-block crossing details. We are still working through these details very much with the city, with transportation and with urban design. And so I would say that the final design for the mid-block crossings is still in discussion in terms of their form, but we are retaining them. And again, as much as possible, trying to anticipate what will happen when the LRT comes in and minimizing as much as possible the disturbance to the future right of way. So that's the end of the presentation. I guess we'll open it up if there are any questions from the panel at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. I'll just remind everybody, it's not meant to really be a major item here, but just to share with the panel if people are okay with these changes, or if you think it should come back to the panel at a future time. So with that in mind, does anyone have any questions or comments? Let's do the questions first.
Fadi here. I have a quick question. Shannon, do we know approximately when, let's say, the first block of buildings on the north side of Commissioner are kind of be tendered and built up? Like when people will be kind of settling and living here vis-a-vis the timeline before, let's say, the BRT gets built? Or is there kind of like a unison kind of synchronization being thought about of when people will be, when the north block of Commissioner and the first set of buildings will be built and when the street will be completed? Or is that two very difficult question.
Well, it is a difficult question, Fadi, and not a question that I didn't anticipate would maybe come up. It's an it's an important question here. So we don't know exactly when either the buildings will be developed or when the LRT will be in place. Certainly, we hope that LRT will be funded soon and be implemented, but there's no timeline that's certain for that at this point in time. And most of the blocks that are north of Commissioners and east of Cherry are owned by Create TO, so they'll be developed out once flood protection is achieved. They need that to be in place before that development can occur. So that's at least looking past 2024.
I'm just gonna say it looks a lot cleaner and clearer and more urban and more comfortable to traverse this now with with this new configuration. So great.
Okay. Thanks, Patty. Any other questions from anyone?
This is Eric. I was just going to say that I think it's a positive move. I think that what I like is that instead of building this interim condition, when the LRT is funded and comes forward in a way, we are going to have a fairly green interim condition, and then over time it will be implemented in its final configuration, which I think is something that I think is actually quite positive.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a comment, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, does anyone have any other comments on this? And I guess the key thing, Chris, you want to know if people are happy with it, that it does not need to come back to the panel at some future time.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, just are people okay with us to move ahead with this, or do they want to have a full discussion around it? Because we're planning to just move ahead with the implementation of this.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Is everybody okay with that? That's really the only question.
It sounds like we're all okay, Chris.
Great, thanks.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks
great.
very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Shannon. So let's move back to general business. I just have one duty which I'm happy to perform, which is an official welcome to Matthew Hickey, who's joining us for the first time on the panel. And Matthew, obviously, I think many of you know him well, but Matthew's a Mohawk from the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, partner of Two Row Architects with 14 years of Indigenous design experience, and a sectional lecturer at OCAD and also of the Board of Artscape Toronto as a director. We went through a selection process. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we issued a call back in August 2020 for a new Indigenous design expert to join the panel. We've interviewed candidates. The panel consisted of Chris, myself, Betsy, and Lorna, as well as a representative from the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And we were unanimous in our decision to recommend that Matthew join the panel. And we think he obviously, in addition to his own professional experience, has brought First Nations perspective outside his own community, is a great listener, and I think will be a very valuable addition to the panel's perspective. So this is his first meeting. So on behalf of the panel, Matthew, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to be here as well. I'm looking forward to working with everyone.
Okay, great.
Does he get to go first on all subjects today, Paul?
Yeah. Okay, let's, I think that we're finished with general business. Let's move into 200 Queens Quay West. First item, it's again, issues identification, so there'll be no vote. And remind everybody, this is a private site. And I believe Carolyn Kim is going to do the introduction.
Good afternoon.
Are you there, Carolyn?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Leon, are you going to be sharing the screen or?
Yes, I will. I just wanted to make sure that Kelly's team is here. Kelly, are you here?
Yep, we're all here.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I will share my screen here.
Sure. And before I begin, I'd actually like to introduce the proponents team from Diamond Court and Lifetime. So Kelly, if you could introduce yourself and your team here before we begin.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Kelly O'Hanlon. I'm with Diamond Corp. I'm also joined by Lori Payne, our Vice President of Development at Diamond Corp, and our partners on the project Lifetime, Brian Brown and Jeff Green are on the call. Presenting today will be myself, Rudy Wallman from Wallman Architects, James Roche from DTAH, and Michael Wong from EQ Buildings. And then also here to answer any questions that you guys have is Alan Lloyd from BA Group and Antonio DeFranco from Urban Strategies.
Okay,
Right.
Carolyn, it's all yours.
Right, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we're here to discuss 200 Queens Quay West, and they are here for issues identification. Next slide, please. And as you heard, the proponent is Diamond Corp and Lifetime Developments. On the design team, we have Rudy Wallman, Wallman Architects and Dita as the landscape architects. And as I said, we are in issues identification. The site is located on the southeast corner of Harbor Street and Lower Simcoe Street. And as you can see, the red line, we have the transit line of 310, 509, and 510, which is the LRT. Next slide, please. In terms of the context, to the north of the site, we have 10 York Street, ICE condos and Infinity condos. To the west of the site, we have the Riviera condos. And to the south, we have the Harbourfront Center and Queens Quay Terminal. And on the same block as the development, we have the Water Club condos. We'd like to note in the dash line that there is a private mid-block laneway that comes through. And it should be noted that at the plan of subdivision for the Water Club condos, the city was not able to secure the necessary easements to ensure future access for this private laneway. Next slide, please. For the project history, the site is situated on the block YQ4 within the harbourfront. The lands were previously owned by Canada Lands Corporation, and a rezoning application was submitted in June 2020. The proposal is with two towers, one at 41 stories and 71 stories, which is connected by a 12-story base building with the POPs located in the southeast corner of Lower Simcoe Street and Harbor Street. City Planning has provided the applicant with formal comments indicating issues relating to the height and massing of the building and have requested amendments. And I should just mention from the city, we have Aviva from Community Planning. So if you do have any questions, you can direct that to her. With regards to the historic parking agreements, the application has proposed to remove and or reduce the parking requirements and arrangements with a number of nearby properties, which include 208, 218 Queens Quay West, 8 York Street, which is the Water Club, 228 to 230 Queens Quay West, which is the Riviera condos, and 207 and 211 Queens Quay West, which is the Queens Quay Terminal. In terms of the anticipated project timelines, a rezoning application was submitted in June 2020, and a community consultation should have or would have taken place this month. Next slide, please. The site is designated mixed use on map 18 of the official plan. Next slide, please. And it is also designated existing use areas under the Central Waterfront Secondary Plan. And lands within the existing use areas will continue to be subject to apparent policies within the official plan and the as of right permissions. Next slide, please. The site is zoned CR, which is mixed use district under the Harbourfront zoning bylaw 289/93 and the site specific zoning bylaw 609/1998. The commercial residential zone permits a broad range of residential and commercial uses. The maximum height is 50 to 66 meters. There are parking requirements on and off site. And the approved zoning heights for the 3 towers on the block, which is a Water Club, were further increased through a minor variance at the Committee of Adjustment, ranging from 24 to 37 stories. Additional contributions for the Water Club development included the provision of a daycare and financial contributions toward community services and facilities, as well as a public library. Next slide, please. For the Central Waterfront Secondary Plan, we are focusing on A, which is removing barriers and making connections, where key cultural and heritage corridors will link the assets of the city within the water's edge. High quality urban design and landscaping on the north and south connector streets. B, building a network of spectacular waterfront parks, where the design of the public realm will be of a standard of excellence. And the public realm will be defined by a coherent framework of streets, parks, buildings, and walkways. The termination of each of the north-south streets will be celebrated by unique public places. And the unifying approach to landscaping and wayfinding shall tie the waterfront together. And D, creating dynamic and diverse new communities. New developments will be located and mapped to protect view corridors and frame the public realm. Next slide, please. And in terms of the site context, this is a view at Harbor and York Street looking southwest, and you can see the existing parking garage. This next one is Harbor and Lower Simcoe looking southeast. Next, please. And this is the Lower Simcoe entrance to the laneway looking northeast. Next slide. And this is the south elevation of the existing parking structure from the east end of the laneway. Next slide. And this is the entrance to the parking structure from the Water Club condos. Next slide, please. As we stated before, we are now at stage 1 review, which is the issues identification. And this is going through the DRP stream 1, which is for private lands. Next slide. Okay, and for areas for the panel consideration from both the city and Waterfront Toronto, we have for public realm and landscape, has the team adequately considered the public realm context? Does the ground floor design support animation and a connected public realm in terms of ground floor program along the street frontages? The design for pedestrian movement to the block, mid-block connections and path connections, landscape improvements to the site, and public opportunities. For the POPs, does it achieve the intent of the POPs? Does the location and the size of the POPs and implications for building footprint, access, parking access, and tower relationships? And for vehicular access and servicing, does the proposed organization support the urban design vision of the site with underground access locations and laneways? Next slide. For building design, does the proposed massing and programmatic strategy support the urban vision of the site with regard to adjacencies with existing buildings on the block, and podium massing and programmatic organization, the existing daycare use, the pet and family friendly amenity spaces? And for sustainability, at this stage of design, do the sustainability principles and vision support the city's sustainability objectives with efficient buildings shape, scale and massing, location and orientation, and retention and reusing stormwater on site? Next slide. I think we're done here. Yes, and I would like to introduce Kelly, or Rudy, I'm not sure who's going to be speaking on behalf of their presentation.
Thank you. I'll start things off. Is the screen shared properly?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Kelly O'Hanlon with Diamond Corp. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon to provide feedback on our 200 Queens Quay West proposal. We purchased this site back in February 2020. It's currently an 8-story above grade parking structure built in the mid 1980s, lot line to lot line, when people moved much differently with cars as the focus, and urban design principles were quite different as well. Fast forward to today, as the last soft site in this particular area, we saw a real opportunity for high quality architecture, an expanded public realm, connectivity between the waterfront and the downtown core, and also an ability to provide affordable rental housing, which will make up 10% of the gross residential floor area of this project. Quick snapshot of what we're going to be talking about today. Caroline did a good job of introducing us, but we This is a project between Diamond Corp and Lifetime. Both companies are very well versed in Toronto and have experience with projects across the city. We've also worked together in the past on a 60-acre community up at Don Mills in Eglinton, known as Crosstown. Again, I'll fly through this since we touched on it, but presenting today will be Rudy Wallman, James Roche, and Michael Wong. And we also are joined by Alan Lloyd and Antonio DeFranco for any Q&A. As mentioned as well, this is a quick shot at where we are at in the process. We submitted our initial rezoning application in June 2020, and since then we've just been out in the neighborhood collecting feedback from the neighbors and the different stakeholders, as well as from the city and different agencies. As we go through the presentation, many things that we will raise are a result of that feedback from the community, in particular as it relates to site access. Here's the block. You can see our site highlighted in green, and the blue hatching line is the outline of the existing parking garage. The block is Harbor Street to the north, Queens Quay to the south, and Simcoe Street and York Street on the flanks. Everything in yellow is owned by our neighbors to the south, the Water Club condominiums. We do have a north-south easement allowing us to achieve that mid-block connection from Harbor to Queens Quay East. But as mentioned earlier by Caroline, the east-west hatching of the laneway that you see there, we do not own that. That is the Water Club's. We did propose a shared access in our initial rezoning application, but as consultation has continued with them, it is very unlikely that we will be able to share that. So when James presents, he is going to go through a couple alternatives that we are exploring. So with that, I am going to pass it over to James to walk you through the public realm.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Next slide, please. And I think since Caroline went through the existing condition photographs, I'll just really quickly go through. There's about 3 or 4 of them here. Again, the view looking southeast towards the site, and I think the photo clearly kind of shows the existing frontage on in the public realm conditions along Harbor Street and Simcoe Street. Next slide. And the view from Queens Quay up to the site and north side and south side. So it does have a strong visual connection to Queens Quay. And also this slide really calls out the importance of the kind of the Gardiner as a kind of gateway threshold to the waterfront. Next slide. A view looking east towards 10 York, again showing a constricted space on the south side of Harbor, and a view from the north, looking north from the northwest side of Simcoe, looking south towards the Gardiner and towards the site. So there is again a window view under the Gardiner. Building on the further discussion on context, this plan identifies a central secondary plan in blue. And the importance of the site relationship to the pedestrian cycling infrastructure along Harbor Street on Simcoe, and also identifies the adjacent green spaces as well as the relationship to Water Club that Kelly had gave an overview on. And we see this project as an intersection, as an important kind of gateway to the waterfront and establishing, enhancing, contributing to a network of public spaces and plazas and open spaces. Next slide. Some further context really quickly, just showing the adjacent parks and many spaces, open spaces within walking distance of this site. Next slide. And as Kelly mentioned, the 4 kind of main design objectives for the project include design and delivery of a high quality public space to enhance pedestrian cyclist connections and infrastructure, to provide a range of housing types in an urban environment, and deliver high quality architectural design. Now I'm going to walk you through the current thought process for the creating an enhanced public realm, and also some of the issues, considerations as we further develop our designs. And a quick zoom into the immediate context, and the site is important, again, intersection for the pedestrian and cycling systems, but also converging with the north-south increased pedestrian movement along Lower Simcoe. So we see it as an opportunity, we believe it's an opportunity to create a POPs along the western side of the site, as another moment along that experience along Simcoe. And as a the design approach also created a green buffer along Harbor Street and also along the Water Club on the south side. Some other existing site considerations, we have the off-ramp coming off the highway, and you can see in this photograph the spaces underneath the Gardner, which I'll get into in a few minutes. 10 York, and also the further east, we have the transformation along Harbor Street already beginning with the thickening of the public realm, creating pedestrian access, planting multi-use trail, maintaining multi-use trail, but also allowing for driveways and access on the south side. And of course, consideration for Queens Quay, work that's been done, and looking at the detailing materials, and also I mentioned before the view connection to Queens Quay from this site. Next slide. So we began to put together some quick site organization analysis diagrams, and to begin to look at how we, working with Wallman Architects and with the BA group, to establish appropriate setbacks, to create the POPs on the west side, but also to create, expand a landscape public ground buffer on the north side, and also on the south side with the Water Club. And we've just begun to look at, of course, material palette. We're going to be working with Rudy and the team to develop different material palette. And given the relationship of Simcoe to the off-ramp and to the underpass area, we think lighting will be very important within the POP design. And also, of course, to enhance tree canopy and create seating areas, thicken public realm along Simcoe Street. Next slide. Looking at Harbor Street, we're going to maintain the multi-use trail, introduce pedestrian walking south of the trail, and where we can to soften the edge through planting. There's a lot of utilities on the northern side of the site as well, so we're going to have to work hard to find where we can have tree planting along Harbor Street. Next slide. There's two section cuts on the screen, and the gray block is more or less the relationship of the existing garage to Harbor Street, and the orange line shows how working with Rudy Wallman and to position the building to create more of a generous realm on the front side and an active frontage. So we're going to change it from roughly 5 meter public realm now to a range of 9 to 11.7 meters on in the proposed design. And we could also introduce new cycling infrastructure, parking, and maintenance element within possibly within the POPs to address the increased flows. Next slide. And some, again, the image again of 200 Queens Quay looking east and towards 10 York, and further east with the work at near Bay and Harbor with the improved south side multi-use trail, pedestrian walkway, and planting. And we're going to carry that across into this site. Next slide. Zooming into the POPs, and at the moment, what's shown on the plan is roughly 443 square meters. And we see this as an opportunity to step the building back from the property line to create a new plaza that will respond to the active frontage of the building, but also respond to the increased pedestrian movement north and south on Simcoe. Next slide. And again, sections showing the gray box of the garage and the orange line of the current setback for, along Simcoe, where we can introduce planting, soil volume for trees, seating, lighting elements, and a spill out space to interact with the active frontage with the building. Next slide. The current view looking south along the east side, it's a very tight sidewalk right now, and increased foot traffic. And some examples we'll be looking at, of course, of projects where you get more of a thickened plaza and spill out space, and through planting, through lighting, through material, create a bit more of a positive space out of a negative space. And also, we're continuing to advance looking at the redefining relationship with the Water Club through the creation of a new public space on the south side, with enhanced planting. We know planting grows there now, and with the setback of the building, we could have more light in that space, creating a strong visual connection also between the drop-off to Harbor Street, but also through the mid-block connection to the south side of Queens Quay. So right now, the section doesn't say it, but the existing buffer on the south side is 2 meters to the property line. And with the options we're looking at, we're going to expand that public realm and allow for possible amenity space there. In this case, we're showing a pet relieving area on the south side. And that also has that kind of social aspect to it to, again, have more of a positive impact and transformation within the laneway. Next slide. So the existing photograph on the left, and you see some natural light coming through there now, and we're going to expand that, increase that. And we have worked on several different projects. We have smaller dog relieving areas and a bit more playful design and allow for that kind of social interaction at the same time. Zooming back out to a more unified public realm approach, overall approach to the site. Next slide. Quick overlay of the site the orange box is the massing of the current building garage on site. We just overlaid it to see the transformation in relationship to Harbor Street and also Simcoe Street. And then again, the kind of thickened, wider public realm with visual connections to the open spaces in Queens Quay on the south, and a more generous design public realm on Harbor Street. Next slide. As Kelly mentioned, the current proposal submitted to the city, the first submission is based on shared access off of the existing laneway. However, it's owned by the Water Club condos, and therefore we're looking at different options to access 200 Queens Quay. And based on that, we need to develop some other alternatives. Next slide. This option, which is the preferred option at the moment, is the having the primary access from Harbor Street. This would include for parking, loading, and drop-off, and the benefits, it maintains a POPs on the west side. It accommodates still the widened public realm on Harbor Street with increased buffer on the south side of the building, roughly 6.2 meters on the south side. This will be a right in, right out, and we're working with the BA group to develop a safe detail with the multi-use trail configuration and to prevent cars from blocking the cyclists and to allow for the kind of a stacking of a car turning right out onto Harbor, and to create a safe design. And this will be an ongoing process. Next slide. Option 2 maintains a driveway on Simcoe Street with parking access from Simcoe. This obviously changes the POPs. There's be more mixed vehicular traffic pedestrian movement on Simcoe Street. Loading access would be maintained off of Harbor Street with a slightly different layout to address different traffic pattern with the multi-use trail. And this would have a smaller buffer on the south side of the building with the Water Club. Next slide. In addition to developing a landscape vision for 200 Queens Quay, we've been asked to also review its relationship to the underpass and future connections north. And there's potential for Section 37 contribution to go towards a future process for reimagining the design of the underpass. And this future process would include engagement, of course, with the city, Bentway, BIA, Harbourfront, and Waterfront Toronto. And as a precursor to that future process, we are developing working diagrams, analysis, and look at the connection zones, pedestrian spaces, occupiable spaces, vertical elements, and we'll also start to look at stormwater within the space and mapping out different areas where there's also some partial sunlight. And it's a very simplified diagram right now, but we have identified different areas. And on the right, you see the POPs in relationship to those different conditions. There's the crossing zone with the north-south pedestrian movement. And zone 1 is an area that's underneath the off-ramp, and its direct connection to the multi-use trails. So Zone 1 and Zone 2 have direct access, Zone 2 to the 10 York development and public realm further east. And with other sites on the north side, of course, with Roundhouse Park, there's a different relationship there because it's a large wall and in the service lane at that corner, and of course northeast corner with connections to the path in the future. But these are all different spaces that have to be considered in relationship to the changing design at 200 Queens Quay. Of course, this allows for different pavement treatments, opportunities for lighting as projection on the columns. Again, as the Gardner is a visual kind of gateway, it could really be activated and through seasonal lighting, but also permanent lighting and projected light on the columns and on the girders and such. Next slide. There's also an opportunity for artwork that can speak to the cultural history, changing waterfront, again on the columns at the Roundhouse Park, the wall, and some of the occupied spaces, like the one on the south west corner underneath the off-ramp, can allow for occupation through seating, through play elements, of course, designed in a safe way to further animate the intersection. So zooming back out to the site and close the discussion on the public realm, we see this project as having a positive impact, contribution to the changing public realm. And through the benefits of new POPs, through the possible improvements in the future to the under Gardner overhead intersection, and also improving the pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. So at this point, I'm going to pass over to Rudy to walk us through the architectural.
Thank you, James. I'll be talking about the parameters that we're taking into consideration as we design the buildings. Next slide. So this is a familiar site plan showing our site in the middle. The orange buildings to the south, directly to the south of us, are the 3 Water Club towers. To the northeast, 10 York. To the west, the Riviera condos. And then further afield, the Roundhouse Park to the northwest, and the York Street Park or Love Park to the east, east of York Street. Generally speaking, thinking about the parameters for the ground floor, we thought that we should have active uses facing the streets along Harper Street and Simcoe Street. That's shown in the red dotted line. And more passive or service uses at the back, shown in the purple line, opposite the drop-offs and service areas for the Water Club. This generally kind of gives rise to this kind of diagram, which shows the 2 main moves, the POPs on the west side of the site, and a potential drop-off in the middle of the site for traffic, with associated with a landscape buffer along the south edge. That then starts to guide where we place program elements like the residential lobbies on either side of the drop-off, leading to elevator cores on either side again. Retail facing Harbor Street and Simcoe Street, and all the servicing shown in yellow at the back of the site facing south. On the upper levels, when we start to think about the tower configurations, we've identified build zones. So on the lower tower portions, we're using tall building guideline setbacks as a guide, and we are creating 12.5, we're cognizant of creating 12.5 meter setbacks to adjacent property lines on the south, west, and east. And that creates kind of this hatched area in the middle, which is the potential area for the location of the towers. Next slide. The upper towers, roughly above 34 meters, follow the same setback guidelines of 12.5 meters to property lines, but have an additional requirement shown in the dotted purple line of a flight path requirement from the island airport. And that starts to narrow the amount of the build zone that we have as we go east on the site. What that results in, generally speaking, is we think 2 tower locations as shown here, which comply with 12.5-meter setbacks to property lines. In addition to that, 25-meter setbacks between the 2 towers. In the lower part of the towers, we can create tower floor plates. So on the west side, have an area of 798 square meters, and on the east side, an area of 896 square meters. On the upper levels, the west tower essentially remains the same floor plate, but the east tower has to be shifted to a smaller plate of about 744 square meters on those upper levels. And it's important to note our separations to the existing water club buildings, so that we have discovered and have shown that in most cases we actually exceed the tall building guidelines separation requirement of 25 meters. That goes down to a smaller number only in the west part of the site, where the separation is about 18 meters. And that's because of the proximity of that western water club tower to its north property line. We've also generally started looking at street sections. So this is the east-west section through Lower Simcoe Street, with the Riviera condos on the left and our building on the right in orange, showing the configuration of the POPs and the height of the proposed podium at 44 meters or 12 stories. The kind of black dotted line indicates the potential for a bump out of the podium to better relate the tower to the space of the POPs, while still maintaining this kind of undercut underneath the tower to give pedestrian protection to pedestrians. The north-south section through Harbor Street and over to Queens Quay, showing 10 York to the left. What's important here is the studying of the podium heights that we're doing and how those relate to both the buildings to the north as well as Water Club to the south and its various podium and massing configurations. Next slide. So that results in these kind of massing diagrams that we've started to do. And as you can see here, this indicates the 71-story east tower with the 41-story west tower. The surrounding buildings are indicated in their location, and we're using these massing models to, first of all, further study the location and arrangement of our buildings, as well as relationship to adjacent buildings. You can see here how in the upper part of the east tower, the podium, the tower shape is set back to comply with the Island Airport flight path. Next slide. And these are just further views taken of the same massings. We can start to study the space between the buildings and between our own buildings, but also between our buildings and 10 York and Water Club. This is looking towards the southeast and looking northwest towards Roundhouse Park and the relationship of 10 York and our building. So generally speaking, the height of the east tower is roughly the same height as 10 York, and the stepping of the buildings is cognizant of the general stepping of the profile of the skyline, with higher heights to the east stepping down to the west. And the lower height of the west tower also helps to minimize shadows onto Roundhouse Park. We can also use the same massing models to study the separation between us and Water Club. So this is a view from Simcoe Street looking into the site in that space between, in the laneway between our building and Water Club. And again, this is really a substitute for a physical model. So we're trying to create as many views that are necessary to help us guide the design of the buildings. And the last view is a view, another overview looking towards the south, towards the northwest. And we have started doing the normal studies that are required. So starting with shadow studies. This shows a shadow at 918. In fact, the policy requires us to start to study shadows at 1018. And the key items to notice is the kind of central space of the park, east of the Roundhouse building itself, and that kind of circular kidney shape of a playground in the southeast corner of that park. So we can see at 1018 Our west tower actually casts some shadow into the center of the park, but what's important to notice is that by between 10:18 and 11:18, the shadow completely disappears, more or less completely disappears from the site, and is off the site within the next few minutes. And we'll continue to study this. As we cast study shadows further into the day, we wanted to make sure that there's no additional incremental shadow onto the future York Street Park. And what these studies indicate is that the water club towers themselves already cast shadow, so we're not casting any additional incremental shadow onto that future park east of York Street. I'll pass it over to Michael Wong now to talk about sustainability.
Okay, great, thank you. Can we go to the next slide? So this development will be targeting TGS version 3 tier 1. And as James was alluding to earlier, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the public realm so that any design and sustainability elements we put in will be benefiting the public. Looking specifically at the facade, we'll be using a high performance double glazing window system and minimized balcony interface for as few thermal bridges as possible. We'll be implementing bird-friendly treatment on all required glazings, as well as integrated native vegetation and high albedo hardscapes throughout the development with ample bicycle parking. Next slide. Great. Looking more at the building systems as a whole, however, the buildings will be serviced by a high-efficiency hydronic plant with condensing boilers and magnetic bearing chillers at the mechanical penthouse. Suite ventilation will be provided from energy recovery ventilators, and the development will possess an improved envelope with a targeted moderate window-to-wall ratio. And a green roof will be utilized as per the TGS requirements. Next slide, please. So on this page, we've summarized some of our other key strategies for fulfilling all of the requirements of TGS, various strategies and measures to lower single occupancy vehicle usage, measures that target water conservation both within the building and outside. I just wanted to highlight that we will be working closely with Wellman Architects to identify the thermal bridges in the enclosure, and throughout the entire SPA phase, we will be looking for opportunities to minimize and control these heat flows. We're excited to be a part of this development and collaborate with these great design teams, and we're just going to hand it back to Kelly now for some closing remarks.
Thank you. So that is our presentation. Leon, I guess what we do now is open it up to the panel discussion. Should I continue to share the screen as well?
Yeah, feel free to keep the presentation on, just in case we need to refer to any images. I'm going to hand it over to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, if you could keep the images on there, because I imagine members may want to refer to certain slides. So let's open it up for questions first, and I'll just go down a list. And if you, when you ask your question, maybe it could be obviously on anything, but public realm, access, building design, and energy are the 4 categories that were used in the presentation. So Betsy, are you there? You want to open it up?
Yeah, I just have a initial question. I may have more after other people go.
Yeah.
Is there a clear back of house to the condominium development that's immediately to your south? We're always looking for what is the back of the building, and on a site like you have, it would be interesting to understand what is already kind of heavily back of house on those water ones.
I guess this slide here would show it best. With the yellow boxes on the south of the site are where the servicing and the ramp will be coming in here. So this probably shows it the best with the active uses along Simcoe and Harbor.
Does that mirror what Water Club has for their own back of house? So is your back of house and is Water Club back of house matched up?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but their servicing is off of this laneway as well. And right now you can actually see the red line behind it is actually the existing parking garage. So we'll be pulling that back and creating a bigger landscape buffer.
all of their garbage storage and service vehicles are using the back laneway. So yes, they service off the back as well.
Off Simcoe.
Off the laneway.
You okay, Betsy, or other questions?
Yeah, I'm just gonna be keeping, that's okay, keep going.
Can I add questions to Betsy's questions while we're there? Sorry to jump the queue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering, that laneway, who owns that property? Is it those condominiums?
Yeah, that's correct.
And do you have any photographs in your slide deck of what that laneway looks like? Like in your existing photos?
Yes, let me try and find it.
And a supplementary question. At the same time, the backs of the water club building facing, are there units facing the laneway? Are the units facing the buildings that are next to them? The new buildings?
I'll let Rudy answer that, but most of the units are oriented or designed to face south to get those views, but there are units that do face to the north as well.
Yeah, that's correct. The lower floors of the water club actually has a daycare center. I think there's very few units that face into that laneway from water club in their podium. Any units that face into that to the north start at the tower level, and I believe that's the 4th or 5th level up. We do have units. We're proposing some units in our podium facing towards the south into that space. And that's one of the reasons we want to pull back the south edge of our podium as far north as possible to maximize the amount of space in there.
Kelly, it's Alan. I was just going to say, if you don't have a great picture, Google, the little Google guide can actually go right along that laneway for people to get a real feel of what the lane and the driveway looks like.
Leon, in your presentation, you had some pretty good images that captured it.
Let's do that. Let's have a look.
Okay, I'll stop sharing this.
Yeah. Would you like me to share those images? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sure, I can bring that up. So we had 2 images here. This is looking from the east end of the laneway. Here in front of the garage entrance.
Yes, so each of the towers, the Water Club towers, has a loading facility underneath it. So you're looking at the west tower here along the lane, the driveway out on the left to Queen's Quay, but then you can kind of see that sort of behind the stop sign is where our loading area is on the west. I'm not sure, Leon, if you've got the ability to look the other way. Yeah, this is looking west, but a little further.
These are the only photos that I have. Yeah.
Okay. I just wondering I just wonder how much context the panel would appreciate, would be helpful. I'm just wondering if there actually is. I don't know if I can share just a Google image. It might just be useful for people. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yes, please.
Okay, so maybe Leon, I will try and share if you can.
Sure.
Unshare. Okay, so this is just Google. This is looking, so the driveway, I hope everyone can see where I'm looking. So this is basically the shot that Leon's just been showing. This is looking west along the driveway. I'll go that way in a minute, but I'm looking behind me now. So this is looking east now, and you can kind of see that the way that the service area, the back of loading here works towards the east end of the garage. They have service spaces along the back of that building. In the sort of the apex of the 2 buildings, the south and east buildings on York, there is a Portco share facility that's underneath here that serves those buildings. And then here's the linkage, another loading area on the east where the white car is, and there's the linkage out to harbor on the east side of the garage. And you can kind of see the condition that's created along the garage line here. I will go to the other end just to complete the story. So now we're in the west tower for Water Club. Again, the adjacency, the driveway goes under the west building, and a loading area on the south side here. This is where all the garbage gets collected for this west building. And as you hit Simcoe, you'll see the parking ramp on the left, and then you're out through the building. And so this area just on the other side of this column would be where the pop space that James was referring to would be.
Is there any angle where we can look at the north face of the existing buildings above the podium level, just to see the issues are related to tower facing units?
Does that help you? I mean, and Rudy will have to talk to how far away because the building's step back from here or set back from here. So I think Rudy can probably talk
Yeah,
a little further about that. I don't know if this image is helpful.
I think maybe the most useful diagram is that site map showing the Water Club tower floor plates.
Okay, well, I'll stop sharing then.
That's probably right.
Just to elaborate on what Alan was saying, the lower part of the podium of the Water Club is mostly amenity space. So there's a raised swimming pool in there. So that's what was behind the solid walls that you see above the second and third floor.
Okay, any other questions from other members?
I just have a quick question. The daycare in the Water Club, did they have an outdoor space?
I believe they have an outdoor rooftop space, and it's roughly on the third or fourth level, facing out towards the south as well, between towers.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I've got a question, Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a question as well.
All right.
First of all, I just want to commend you guys for taking a look at the Gardner underpass. I think that's super important to this site. And I'm just wondering if you've taken a look at the sectional quality between the north face of your building and that on-ramp at the Gardner. I think that'd be something really important to take a look at.
Sorry, is that question? Is that question
Is that
more
a question or
yeah.
just a comment, Matt?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a section through the north face of the building, through Harbor to the edge of the Gardner.
That's the same question I have as Matthew's.
Okay. Rudy, I don't know if you answer that.
Well, the section that we've taken, we have a north-south section, but it's taken through the 10 York building itself, and the Gardner itself is then directly to the north of that. The ramp that's being referred to is actually beyond our site. It's to the west of our site. The Gardner passes by our site at a raised level at about 5 or 6 stories in the air. It's roughly the same. The Gardner is roughly the same height as the 10 York podium, about 21 meters in the air as it passes by here.
Right, but the condition is closer on the east side of your site.
The east side of our site?
Like
Sorry, the west side of your
right?
site.
Well, we can see, if you go to a site, if we go to a site plan quickly, we could see that. So you can see here, the Gardner is that kind of a curvy line to the north of us. So in that location, it's roughly 25, 30 meters away. And we haven't actually studied that exactly, but it would be worth doing that if we get into the design or any consideration of what could happen underneath the Gardner as part of this gateway study.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could be quite beneficial to take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's several people waiting with questions. I think Peter Busby was next, and then I'll go to you, George, and we'll work our way down the list. Peter, are you there? No? All right, George, you want to jump in?
I can. I this site plan shows the drop off as the blue circle in between the two towers. But we understood from Kelly at the beginning that you haven't succeeded in making a deal with the Water Club about having access to their laneway. So we saw another alternate site plan which had parking access coming in off Simcoe and loading access coming in off Harbor. I'm just wondering, what's the state, what's the state of play here, and which direction are you heading in, and what are the implications of it for the public realm design?
Alan, do you want to speak to that?
I can, yeah.
Alan, I will just start by saying though, this is our proposal as submitted for that first rezoning application. When we talk about the shared laneway access, we're talking about this east-west laneway, which is completely owned by the Water Club. We do not have any rights to it. We do have a north-south easement, so that's running from Harbor down to Queens Quay. But in terms of this access, we do not have rights to it. So as we've discussed with them over time, we've come to an understanding that shared access will likely not be possible, and that's been the reason for these alternatives to the site, which Alan can speak in a little more detail to.
Yeah. So just to sort of respond to this, so we've got two basic frontages that we have access to or ability to provide access to the site from. One is Simcoe, and the other one is Harbor. There is a potential for a secondary access to the Queens Quay, which is the maintenance of the existing easement through the Water Club condominium property for car access. Now that can't be used for big vehicles because there's a headroom question. So we still have this whole how do you service the site appropriately. So what we've shown in this option is an option providing access onto Harbor Street. What it allows in just the broader public realm perspective is the POP space on the west side on the corner of Simcoe and Harbor is its full extent of the space that we have west of the West Tower. And the access is linking straight into the middle of the two towers into a drive court area, and we can talk about design and the appointment of that. But essentially that provides access to the underground parking and to loading facilities, as well as providing a place adjacent to two doors for any of that kind of accessible access and all that kind of stuff that you need at the front door, and to do that on the property. So this is one option, George, but the public realm in this case allows the POPs to stay as James outlined to you. We have got some treatment and detailing about how to make the bike lane and the access work, which is just a technical matter in this way, but we'll work that through with the city, whichever, if this is a solution we end up with. Can you show me the other picture if I'm not sure who's driving? Option 2. So option 2 is the other available frontage. And so we've shown a parking access, in this case, off of Simcoe. So this is roughly where the existing garage entrance would be. It's a little north of the Water Club driveway. It clearly has an impact on the POPs. It has a bike lane relationship that is not pristine either. So because there's bike lanes on Simcoe, so we've got a little bit of a relationship there to wrestle through in terms of our operational story. But what we've crafted here is a circumstance where we still have this sort of front door story requirement and servicing. And so in the way that this plan is configured is we still have retained a less intensely used, but a driveway access on Harbor Street to provide for that between the two buildings. And so the busy parking work is done off Simcoe in this option. And we think that with this kind of arrangement, we may still be asking for a harbor access, but less of an intensely used access condition. I hope that sort of helps to provide this. Yeah.
George, do you have other questions?
Well, it's just follow up. In the case of the configuration you've got on the screen now, how does drop off work for the two towers?
So you come in when I mean, maybe this is a misnaming. It should say loading and front door access into the drive court from Harbor Street.
Oh, no, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I mean, drop off for residents and guests.
Correct. Well, that's where it would be. That would be in the central area, George.
Oh, as well as the trucks.
Yes, correct.
So does that mean the main entrances to the buildings are there?
Yeah, so on the corner, maybe Rudy can point whoever's got the hand,
Okay.
but yes.
Okay.
You can see the
I
elevators,
Yeah.
the two lobbies are an expression to the north and to the
Rudy, do you want to make a comment? Then I want to keep moving through. We got a lot of questioners here.
No,
Well, I'm not finished, so let me
All right.
ask one more, and that is just why, given that you have that right of way down to Queens Quay, why do you call the connection to the south secondary access? Is that because there are legal limitations on the intensity of its use?
Diamond Core can probably talk a little bit more about that, but yes, it's not.
I know you said
Yes.
it's a headroom issue for trucks.
It does have some legal implications that probably we won't get into here. And it also has some good neighborly implications in terms of how our neighbors at the Water Club see use happening along the laneway or on the backside of the building. The way it works today is the vast majority of vehicles come in off Simcoe Street and the main entrance that you see in all the images that we've shown. And it's already a secondary access that uses that easement. And because of our relationship with our close relationship with our neighbors and the legal arrangements related to that easement, it really needs to remain a secondary access.
Okay, that's
Okay,
it, Paul,
George?
for me.
Yeah, okay. I think Peter was next, and then I'll go down the list. Are you there, Peter?
I am. I want to go back, as Rudy suggested, to the plan that shows the suite layouts of the Water Club, in particular the Western Tower, as my issues are going to be around tower separation. Yes, if you could blow up this drawing on the west side so that I can actually see the units in the Water Club. Yes, exactly. So what do we got there? We got that semicircular space is a suite, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So that's a direct kind of frontal issue. And then the suite to the left, it looks like a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So you just got bedrooms facing north.
Correct.
And the same with the suite to the east. That's a 2-bedroom. So there are 2 bedrooms facing north, and the living room faces out to the southeast. So in terms of tower separation, you've got that one critical issues. You got that one suite. The other 2 suites not so critical in that they're just bedrooms there. Is that correct?
That's correct. But even the circular suite, its living room kind of faces off to the side at an angle instead of directly opposite.
Right. Yeah. It'd be wonderful. I know you probably can't do it today, but if you could match this plan with the corresponding plan of your west tower, so I can see how those units face south. You probably can't do it today, but the whole tower separation issue is going to be on who's looking at what between the two buildings. Anyway, I have the information that I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Bridget, are you there? Bridget? No? Fatty?
No questions.
No questions? Okay. Nina Marie, I think you had your hand up.
I did. The question was partially addressed by Matthew. I wanted to understand and maybe just some further clarification. My understanding is that the north west corner of the building, Simcoe and Harbor, is some 25 meters away, 30 meters away from the Gardner. But at that point, it is ramping up, correct? Because we don't actually see that in one of the renderings. I think it's just slightly off the rendering.
No, the Gardner in that location is flat. So the ramp is to the left, to the west of Simcoe Street.
Okay, and so at that point, it is a continuous grade at 20, you're saying about 25 to 30 meters up.
And no, horizontally, separation
Yeah,
distance
sorry,
horizontally,
but it's horizontal.
roughly 21 meters in the air.
Okay, I just wanted to know exactly where that is because it's not actually shown. The images are not relative to the plan; they're just adjacent. I was trying to figure out how far apart that ramping occurred. But in any case, I just come back to the point that it would be particularly because the under Gardner opportunity is expressed as part of your intentions. If we don't see it yet, maybe we'll come back to that in comments. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back. Is Bridget, are you there, Bridget? No. How about Pat? Any questions? Pat?
My question was answered. Thanks very much.
Okay. Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, Peter. I guess really my only question is sort of, how firmly committed are you to the Tier 1 Toronto Green Standard target? Is that, has that been decided? Is there any, alternatives that you guys are looking at getting up to Tier 2, Tier 3?
I think it's early days. We are in the first round of zoning submission. A lot of those decisions get made at the site plan level when we're figuring out building systems and building cladding and all of those issues and opportunities to look at other energy types. We have been in discussions with OnWave and we continue to pursue those, and really our time to make that decision will be coming towards site plan, which is also when the city properly reviews those decisions as well.
Okay, can I just make a follow-up? So when do you anticipate going for site plan approval? If all goes well, will it be in 2021 or not until next year?
It's hard to, it likely will be in 2021, but it will certainly carry into 2022 before it's completed.
Okay, just keeping in mind the progression of the Toronto Green Standard next year and the Tier 1 effectively being dropped. So just looking forward, I'd be looking at Tier 2, just to help. Yeah, thanks.
It's good advice. We're well aware of the date. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Kevin, any questions?
Thanks very much. I'm just wondering. I think Lori addressed actually maybe a bunch of the things that I would want to approach with Jeff. But, in just looking at the massing, which if, for example, something like this scheme goes ahead, I was just wondering, then I'm imagining some preliminary energy modeling perhaps hasn't been done, but sometimes maybe at a very high level, if we do that at this stage, we can build into the pro forma some actually cost-effective lower carbon approaches. So what I was just sort of kind of scribbling a little bit, the towers will have a lot of divergent exposures, and given the shading and given their particular geometry, and I'm just wondering actually as we move into site plan application and we start thinking about systems, kind of building costs into the pro forma, a decentralized heat pump with an ambient loop might actually make this project a lot of economic sense, in that in the kind of shoulder seasons I can anticipate a large number of hours where the building will be in simultaneous heating and cooling. And if you have a decentralized heat pump approach, we might be able to downsize that central plant very, very significantly. So whoever's doing the energy on that, I think it would be great to consider that as like a very cost-effective way to reduce carbon impact. Thank you.
I'm going to take that more as a comment.
I'm sorry. Yeah, have you looked at that approach?
We're trying to do questions. So, okay, save that for a comment. Matthew, do you have any questions?
Nope, I've already asked mine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go back. I don't know if Bridget is still there or what happened. Are you there, Bridget?
Remember, she told us she had to drop off for a bit.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll catch her. So let's move to comments. Then I'm going to start with George, please. George, are you there?
Somebody muted me, probably Leon.
That's impossible. Okay, George, take it away.
I basically have two issues which are interrelated three issues that are interrelated in my mind. One has to do with the POPs, by which I'm not persuaded. I'm not against open space, but I don't know that this is the right optimal place for one. So I'm skeptical as to the on balance the benefits of the production of the POPs as part of the scheme. And as I said, these are interrelated issues, and of course, one of the interrelationships is with, well, the other two factors are much more nitty gritty. The one is access to the site, and the last one is the facing distance issue that Peter Busby was talking about between the proposed west tower on this site and the far west tower on Water Club to the south. And all of that leads me to think that the interrelationship of those three issues would probably benefit from, before I say, my suggested direction, let me say that this is not an easy site to deal with, and I want to congratulate the team for having, addressed the tangle of issues that it raises as effectively as they have so far. I think the idea of moving north away from the Water Club driveway with your building faces is, well, it's good for you and it's good for them. So hats off to you for that. And of course, that's interrelated with the idea on your east tower of the flight path issue from Billy Bishop, which produces the floor plate configuration, which is obviously challenging, but we know Rudy did 10 York across the street, so we know he's good at triangular floor plans. So my suggestion is to make the west tower in floor plan more like the east tower, so that it is at least somewhat wedge shaped to address the facing distances issue to the west tower of Water Club. That means both pulling back and angling the south facade of the west tower. It means pulling the west facade west, and I'm kind of open as to how far it goes because of my indifference to the value of the POPs. And then it would seem to me that hopefully that enables you to open up the open space in between your west and east towers to deal with the tangle. You've got a tangle of access issues to deal with there anyway, whether you have your access off harbor, which I'm skeptical the city will be happy about, or whether it ends up on Simcoe, which will be more complex in terms of the drop-off function, but maybe it can be made to work. But at least it gives you some leeway for landscaping in the space in between, which might not be a formal POPs, but I think would overall be a greater benefit for the scheme as a whole. So those are my main comments, Paul. And as you can see, it's a kind of complex interrelationship of the issues to do with the POPs, the access, and the facing distance.
Yeah, they're very much interconnected. Okay, thanks, George. Betsy, are you ready to go next?
I am. Thank you so much. I reiterate, it's a really tough site. There's so much back of house on your south side, and there is already so much road access to that building. So how do you do what you need to do for access without adding more road? And from what you've said, it sounds like your negotiations haven't been successful. That for me would be an obvious place to maybe restart a conversation, because it's kind of a no-brainer and it saves you a lot of trouble. I guess the second question is, what's the best public realm possibly that you can achieve on this site? It is so urban, and I think as with George's suggestions, leaning into that urbanity is likely your best choice. You have to ensure that access, I think, should be kind of where it is already on the site. It's a really small block. There are lots of access points already. There must be a way to consolidate things. Can you pair up your laneway with their laneway, maybe making yours smaller because theirs is already so big? You could creatively maybe call it a muse, like a different kind of giant tall building muse situation. If there's a creative kind of angle to call that part of a POPs, that could be interesting. The curb cuts off of Harvard in both options I don't think are successful because you're just inviting more vehicles to stop on Harvard and you're creating a dangerous situation where bikes are going to be speeding along that area. So I would sort of not support the curb cuts on Harvard. They're creating a larger negative impact, I think, than your POPs is presenting a positive one. So I would look at, as with George's suggestion, stretching your building out to allow for the good tower separation and to create laneway access potentially on the backside so that you can really embrace kind of the urban form that you already have on the site. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Peter.
Yeah, I'm rarely in complete alignment with George, but I am today. And the suggestion of going, and Betsy supported this, of going to a flat iron type shape for the west building, stretching it farther to the west, encroaching on that POPs area is a very good idea. The owners of the units in the new tower will get better views and they'll be happier and there'll be more revenue to the developer. And we will respect the face-to-face issues that are created by the 18-meter tower separation. I also support George's idea of downplaying the POPs and moving some of that landscaping and space to the courtyard, to the turning courtyard in the center between the two buildings. It looks pretty bleak right now. It's got no landscaping and it's just a hard space. Could you make it a nicer place to arrive? There are thousands of people living in these two buildings. That two lobbies come off that space. There's a turning circle there. That's where all the taxis are. All the Ubers are going to be. That's where the pizza guy is going to be. It's a busy space. It needs softening and landscaping. And I would sacrifice some of the POP space in exchange for making that a much more acceptable space. So I think I'm very much aligned with George's comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I'm not sure if Bridget is able to rejoin us now. Are you there, Bridget? No.
Don't see her initials.
I'll go back. Okay, Fatty?
Sorry, it just takes a second for it to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very complex site. I think, you know, every square millimeter of accessible public realm is important and worthwhile our attention. So I really commend the team for going through such efforts to try their best to add to the public realm. I just wanted to maybe add one other, I agree, I just wanted to mention up front that I also agree with the assessment of trying to do a bit more with the space of the circulation and that north-south connection through the mid-block out into Queens Quay, especially if it's also going to be potentially visible from Queens Quay. You know, one of the things that I think maybe I felt like the emphasis might have been just a little bit less clear in the presentation. I did mention dog relief area multiple times, and I would hate for POPs to be seen as condo dog relief areas and more as actual potential community spaces. And again, this is maybe also one of the reasons why I asked about that daycare. And it's not necessarily that the daycare might be a part of it, but I would be really excited to understand a little bit more how these spaces could be activated, how they're lit, what their microclimatic conditions are like. What does it feel like to be really close to these highway off-ramps and generate space that is really hospitable and acceptable? So even though the site is very small, I think the emphasis on what is being presented as a public contribution effort in which the public realm, as valuable and as limited as it is, all the elements that are being proposed are all working towards the increasing of comfort and of contributing back to the community in as many ways as possible. Of course, I understand. I live in these tall condos, so I can kind of see the extreme need for dog relief. But it's almost feels like the ultimate contribution to these places should really be about the amelioration of that really intense urban environment, especially the highway all the way around it, and finding ways to soften it and to create, increase the mental health contributions and the kind of added social value of gathering space in such hostile and intense urban spaces. So that's my overall comment. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Fatty. And Anna Marie, you there?
Yeah, thank you. As you know, many of my comments obviously will resonate with Fadi's. I'm in agreement with many made so far. Just like to expand very briefly on the POPs. This, you know, when you're doing a POPs, I think it has to give really optimum public value for the get. And you know, this is such a challenging site, as my colleagues have already mentioned. You know, we're in a time now where we're really reconsidering how much and where we place extremely important investments in the public realm, and our private sector partners are so critical to do this well. So that this is a parks-rich area, I think, with Love Park and Reese Park coming with, as the presentation pointed out, the links to the Roundhouse and to points beyond. Whatever the POPs is, if it's there, really has to activate that in ways that Fadi's mentioned, but also so that we're really attuned to the extra density that's coming. Also means greater demand for residents' mental and physical health and well-being. That's certainly top of mind right now. I know these projects start long before we get to the conversation point in the middle of a pandemic, but this spot really has to work for us. And I think for the extra residents in particular, finding ways for what minimal soft vegetation or soft design qualities are there, they're really got to work for you. So finding ways to absorb particulate matter, maximize exposure to shade, actually natural shade where possible for cooling, but also sunlight opportunities that maybe are visual cues through and under that Gardner connection. And Matthew mentioned this early on, but I think some exploration of that connection that really strongly pulls to the public realm and brings people visibly into those spaces, if not physically on such a confined site, is really critical. Not that we don't appreciate the dog relief area, but I think it can't certainly take priority of explanation at a time when the opportunities for multiple gains in the vegetation on the site could really be there with thoughtful design, particularly around microclimatic connections. So I think maybe rethinking the value that we're getting from that POPs relative to the constrained site is really critical. And there are, I think, smart ways that you've hinted at that could be developed more fully. I appreciate the challenges of this site. I also appreciate that we're at a time now where maybe we're rethinking density in condos differently as to how to get value from the critical public realm around them. Thank you very much for the presentation and the opportunity to comment.
Okay, thanks, Nina Marie. Pat.
Hi. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think it's kind of a fantastic project in that it's replacing a parking garage, which is pretty nasty. So, you know, this is going to be, you know, in one form or another, a kind of a great contribution. I agree with everybody about the POPs. I just sort of see it as a landscape forecourt right now. I'm not sure. It's not really connecting. It's not, I don't see it contributing great congregating space, and I don't see that it's actually making kind of significant connections. I do think, though, that there's got to be a better solution, or there is an opportunity along that laneway to the south that hasn't really been fully considered. I just think there's got to be an opportunity there. That faces south, not all of the standing there, it's blocked by buildings, but it will get sort of ample light, I think, from the west and from the east. So I would just encourage the team to really think outside the box and try to consider what that space might be. I'd also needs to be represented differently. It looks vast, but when you actually look at the Google Earth, you realize that it really is only a narrow lane because the building at the second floor is hanging over it, and so that there's actually columns. It's just not represented in your plans accurately. So I think part of drawing it more accurately with the upper floors, what also kind of helps to sort of prompt some design thinking. I also am interested in the dog relief comment, and I just offer this up as a suggestion from a meeting I was at a couple of weeks ago, where the dog relief thing always becomes an issue, and everybody talks about people leave their dogs so late that the minute they walk out the front door, the dogs kind of do it right there, like 3 feet away from the front door, and everything smells and it's disgusting and ruins plant life and all of that. And one of my clients suggested, and I think this is kind of brilliant, that reconsidering dog relief areas in the on the roofs of podiums, incorporated into outdoor amenity space, makes it easier for residents to get their dogs outside, but it also keeps it on the property. So there's a kind of ownership and a maybe this is all speculative, but also a kind of pride of place that might slightly shift the kind of behavior of people managing their dogs' need to relief. Anyway, thanks very much. Glad to see the project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'm just going to sort of follow along with everyone else and support the recommendations around pushing the west edge of the building out into the pop space. I think I'll always play the card that I work. When I was going to the office, it was at Queens Quay Terminal, so I spent a lot of time in the area, and there is a lot of green space. I think that's sort of an extra space that I think I'd actually like to see more stuff down there. And that I just want to comment on one sort of pedestrian flow that wasn't really discussed is, the access onto Harbor Street specifically isn't very helpful for pedestrians because there's no way to cross Harbor Street. If you want to get north, you've got to go over to Simcoe. So that actual the connection from the sort of drive through between the buildings over to Simcoe Street down that laneway is kind of the key traffic area that you're going to see. And I think if you sort of take that wedge shape, you could animate it really well, and you could actually help to augment what is actually not a great streetscape along that stretch of Queens Quay. There is retail there, there's a dentist's office. It tends to be very wide, very shallow retail. There's not much. So there's also a key crosswalk over to Queens Quay Terminal that aligns with that sort of central driveway. So I envision a lot of pedestrians coming down Simcoe Street, cutting down that laneway, potentially to a space that has some retail and more animation, going between the buildings and cutting south over into Queens Quay Terminal or down to the waterfront through that pedestrian route. So I think there's really a lot of opportunity to enhance that one specific pedestrian flow and prioritize that and improve the experience of pedestrians from what's there right now, going between the buildings, and even what's not a great corner at the northeast corner of Queens Quay and Simcoe. Otherwise, I'll sort of go back to my comment around the energy piece. I think I will always suggest, we be looking as aggressively as we can at these energy performance targets around the Toronto Green Standard. You can be in a race against the clock around getting in under version 3. But keeping in mind, of course, that version 3 goes away next year, but 4 years after that, version 4 will be updated, and by 2030, we're looking at buildings being close to carbon neutral. And so I would very much hate for this building, being completed, sort of in the mid part of this decade, that it's going to be obsolete not much after it's built. So push those energy performance targets. And I know Kevin's got lots of recommendations on how to do that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Let's go to Kevin and then Matthew. 2 other members yet to comment. Kevin?
Thanks very much. I made majority of my comments already, but just to reiterate, the more I'm kind of thinking about it and sort of sketching it a little bit, there's a lot of area where the building has simultaneous exposures. for simultaneous heating and cooling. And I think there's a real opportunity to move the energy around within the building. So if there's any, and similar to what Jeff's saying, it has to make financial sense. And I think in this case it can, if we move to a decentralized approach and really push on turning down that central plant, we can redistribute the money throughout the suites and move the heat around, get a really reduced carbon footprint. Especially, that would make a lot of sense if we do tie into some district system like Enwave. So I would really encourage, a study of a decentralized heating and cooling system, like a decentralized heat pump system, unit by unit on an ambient loop. And tying into that, I would encourage you to do a whole building connectivity analysis so that you could tie the performance of the envelope to the size of that system. So as the system goes down, you can put more money into the facade, and that's a good thing. So, with that preliminary study and doing a whole building thermal conductivity analysis, I think that's where you can start building the pro forma around good financial sense and low carbon. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Matthew, any comments?
Thanks,
to
Paul.
wrap it up?
Just to reiterate what Nina Marie said, is that I think that this is an opportunity to connect the waterfront with the downtown core. You're unfortunately right beside a major piece of infrastructure that's causes this huge break. And there's a great opportunity for this corner site where the POPs is now to be a connector piece as opposed to a place of destination. So thinking about that and thinking about how you can create more of a connection between the waterfront and through underneath the Gardner is a direction that I would move in. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think we've covered everyone. Anyone else have any additional comments they want to add before I summarize? Okay, thank you. I'm going to start off by, first of all, saying that this is a good news story. It's a very difficult site, it's very challenging, but the starting point is quite unique. When do you ever get a chance to remove a parking garage, especially on the waterfront? So I think you're to be commended for taking this on. And also, it's an opportunity to improve the living environments of people that are living in Water Club condo towers, as well as future residents in the new building. So I think that's really important. The reality is also, it is a major opportunity, as you've heard throughout the commentary, to really make substantial improvements to that east-west lane and that central courtyard, which the images that we're showing are pretty rough. It's pretty nasty in there. So all of those are unique potential, have unique potential. And I think you've heard the commentary that basically everything's connected to everything here. The public realm, the access, the building design are all very much interconnected. With respect to the public realm, I think the consensus is that people are quite skeptical, to say the least, about the value of the POPs being on Simcoe Street, and a suggestion has been made to move and concentrate much improved landscaping to that center courtyard area to make that softer, more pleasant, more inviting. More value would be added to the block by doing that, as opposed to leaving the POPs on Simcoe. Related to that, obviously, is the opportunity to make that west tower wedge shaped so that the facing distances between the old and the new buildings are much better. And that would open that up, create more light view privacy conditions into both of those. So the reference to the Flatiron analogy, of course, was made. Third, related to all of that, is the access condition. And I think there are a number of suggestions, but there seemed to be a consensus that people aren't too convinced the value of having curb cuts on Harbor Street. It's a new street. It's basically going to be a lot of fast-moving traffic on there. I think the concern is that to interrupt all that with curb cuts would probably be a mistake. I guess the strongest direction is to push harder, go back and consult with over and over the owners and the representatives of Water Club to consolidate access, to look at all the opportunities to consolidate the vehicular access, and push that thinking with revisiting the idea of the shared lane, looking at a stronger north-south connection from Queens Quay, both for perhaps as a secondary vehicular access, but also for pedestrians. I've walked from Queens Quay through there, and you go into this awful environment. And I think the reference that's been made by several people about connecting Queens Quay through to the north, related to the idea of opening up the pedestrian desirability of people walking from Queens Quay north into the improved courtyard would be a huge win-win. In terms of the next steps, I understand clearly where this application is with the city. There's lots of issues to sort out about height and density and everything else. But whatever the end result is, it's going to be a very urban, intense block. And that underscores, again, over and over again, the need to make the public realm and the access and the pedestrian and vehicular access all much improved, and there's that unique window of enhancement that you have here. You're only going to get a chance to do this once, and it has to be done right. So I guess the overall direction is thanks for what you've shown us so far. Good ideas. Push much harder. Rethink where the POPs is going to go, and make that central courtyard something that everyone can in fact enjoy and will be able to use. And as far as building design is concerned, clearly I think the suggestion is a very good one to make that west tower wedge shaped for the reasons that have been stated. Finally, in terms of energy strategies, many technical suggestions, but I mean, the bottom line is aim much higher. As one of our members said, this building will probably not get built until the mid-2020s, and by then the green building standards will be much greater than they are today, and there's an opportunity to think long-term in terms of how this building is going to perform over many decades, not just today's standard. So I think those are the basic directions that you've heard from the panel. And again, thanks for taking this on. And we love to work with you. We look forward to this coming back. And this is a great potential story. And so we encourage you to think out of the box, push harder, and consult with us anytime. But we look forward to it coming back. So thank you very much. There is no vote on this because it's only issues identification, but we do give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the comments that you've heard. So I don't know whether Kelly, you want to do that, or Rudy, or who would like to speak for the applicant.
I'll just start by saying thank you very much for your guys' time. We really do appreciate the feedback, and as all of you have said, this is a complicated site with many factors that we're weighing as we're going through this. We are very early in the process still, so we're going to take back this feedback, the feedback that we got from the city as well, its agencies and the community, and see what we can do. And we look forward to coming back to the next DRP meeting to show you guys what we've come up with.
Okay, thanks very much, Kelly. Best of luck.
Thanks.
Thank you. Be bold. Be bold. Okay, it's 5 to 3. We're a little bit behind, but we're scheduled to take a very short break. I want to reconvene right around just after 3 o'clock if we can, give people an opportunity to stretch. Okay, so let's resume. Second item, 12 Leslie Street, also issues identification, but this is, of course, a public site and one that we have never seen before. So I believe Adam is going to do the introduction. Are you there, Adam?
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I am here.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Okay, great. Leon, are we going to present it from your screen or?
Yeah, I'm controlling the slides, so just let me know when you want me to advance.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Adam Novak, Design Project Manager with Waterfront Toronto. And I'll also be co-presenting today with Jennifer Tharp with Create TO. And I believe Jennifer will be presenting this slide. Thank you.
Hi, so my name is Jennifer Tharp. I'm the Manager of Development at Create TO. My role in this project is to project manage the design and construction of the Leslie Slip Lookout Park. I also wanted to note that Han Liu, Director of Major Projects at Create TO, he's also on the line. So to begin with the project description, the Leslie Slip Lookout Park is a new destination park in the Eastport area of the Portlands at the end of the ship channel at 12 Leslie Street. The park is located along the Martin Goodman Trail and is close to the entrance to Tommy Thompson Park. The park is just under 0.8 hectares or 1.9 acres in size. It currently sits on land that is zoned industrial. We've done extensive soil testing on site, and contaminants that are present come from former industrial tenants on the property. The contamination levels exceed the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Park standards for parks and recreation uses. As part of remediation efforts, we're undertaking a risk management plan that will include capping in addition of clean topsoil to make the park safe for future uses, for future park uses and recreation uses. In 2017, Council adopted with recommendations the Portlands Planning Framework Report. And in this report, staff were directed to develop an implementation plan for a number of sites in the Portlands, including the Leslie Green Portal. In fall 2020, Create TO led a procurement process to hire a team led by a landscape architecture firm to design and manage construction of the new park. An RFP was issued to 3 firms following a request for qualifications, open competitive process. The conceptual design proposal led by Claude Cormier and Associates was selected as the winning scheme. This conceptual design will be subject to full public consultation set to begin next month. I also wanted to note that we'll be working with Laura Consulting and the Indigenous Affairs Office at the City of Toronto to develop an outreach and engagement plan for this park. We're also working on developing opportunities as well for Indigenous placemaking in the park. Probably the next time we come back to Design Review Panel, we'll have more information on this particular aspect of the project. Park construction is estimated to begin in 2020, with environmental remediation construction work to begin later this year. And so our design team, as I mentioned before, is being led by Claude Cormier and Associates, with GH3, who's the designer of the Lookout Pavilion, and Eric, the engineering and construction management. The next slide.
Are you still there, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm still there. I'm going to pass this one back to Adam.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. So as we can see here, the 1.9 acre site in the Portlands is located along Leslie Street at the eastern extent of the ship channel. Currently, the site is adjacent to active industrial uses, including strata aggregates to the south. Just want to also note along Leslie Street, we can see that the Martin Goodman Trail does run parallel along Leslie Street and continues into Tommy Thompson Park directly to the south. Next slide, please. Oop, next slide, please. Thank you. As we can see here on the ownership map, the site is currently owned by Toronto Portlands Corporation, which is now commonly known as Create TO. And we can see here that it's adjacent to active industrial uses on either side. Looking at the land use policy context map, we can see kind of the future intent is along Leslie Street and including at this terminus of the ship channel for it to be a major park and open space. And also there will be a future Water's Edge promenade on either side of the ship channel on the north and the south. Also want to note here, as you can see, there's a label called Leslie Green Portal that runs on either side of Leslie Street. We'll go further into that later, but basically there's a vision for that within the Portland's planning framework document. Next slide, please. I also want to note here too that the planning framework document did note that within the Portlands, there's several key prominent views, and one of them is located within this project site. And the planning document does note the open space at the terminus of the ship channel will provide an outlook and long view down the ship channel, an integral part of the original 1912 plan for the Portlands and the Portland's evolving skyline. The view captures the full breadth of uses and activities envisioned in the Portlands and activation of the ship channel. Development lining the ship channel will frame the future Water's Edge Promenade and be articulated to create interest. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Leslie Green Portal, which is located on either side of the site and on the site itself, the Leslie Slip Lookout will provide a naturalized plaza and lookout down the ship channel at the terminus of the Leslie Street Slip. The Leslie Green Portal will be a wide green spine on the east and west sides of Leslie Street and will act as a major pedestrian and cycling gateway to Tommy Thompson Park. Between Commissioner Street and the Leslie Slip Lookout, the width of the park on either side of Leslie Street will be a minimum of 50 meters wide. Between the Leslie Slip Lookout and Unwin Avenue, the width of the park on the west side of Leslie Street will be a minimum of 50 meters. The width of the existing park on the east side of Leslie Street will be maintained, at least its current width. And permitted uses will include agricultural uses, subject to meeting environmental and regulatory requirements, park and recreational uses, and cogenerational energy uses associated with the Ashbridges Bay treatment plant, and provided the use is not within a wholly enclosed building and the design complements the portal. Where rail access into the Portlands is required to be maintained, the rail sidings will be integrated with the park design. A small retail store or restaurant may be considered on the west side of Leslie Street, subject to demonstrating that the use will complement the overall park function and design. In terms of where we are in the DRP process schedule, so we're basically in the upper left corner. The first step, which is issues ID. So depending on next steps, the next time this project would come back to the panel would be for stage 2 schematic design, potentially another stage 2 schematic design, and then for detailed design. And now I'll turn it back to Jennifer.
So in the review of all of the design concepts that were received through the process, the jury made the following comments on specific to the Claude Cormier proposal. First, the jury noted the simplicity, openness, and flexibility of the spaces that will provide opportunities for large gatherings such as movie nights, concerts, etc. Yet still provide more intimate settings for small groups and individual park users. The jury noted that they could easily envision the park animated with year-round events and activities. The jury appreciated the elegance and timelessness of the design. The proposal embraced the park as the focus of its design, and there were no hidden sight lines, and opportunities for lush vegetation were maximized. The proposal was also implementable and raised few concerns for future maintenance and operations. The jury also noted that Claude Cormier and his team have a record for executing successful downtown and waterfront parks and the ability to turn small objects into works of art. So next slide.
Waterfront Toronto would like to pose the following points for the panel's consideration with regards to the design concept. Does the design concept meet the goals of the Portland's planning framework? Does the design concept support the evolving character of Leslie Street and the greater Portlands? Does the design concept allow for future connection and integration with the Leslie Green portal? Does the design concept support the framework view corridors? And then from an environmental standpoint, does the design push the performance of parks as green infrastructure? How does this landscape perform from an ecological standpoint? Does the design advance Waterfront Toronto's goals for sustainable landscapes? Now I'll turn it back to Jennifer for the city's points.
So further to Adam's points, additional areas for panel consideration, including location access and wayfinding. Does the design concept adequately address and mitigate its industrial adjacency? Does the design provide for appropriate access and wayfinding? On the digital consultation point, does the design process adequately incorporate the objective for Indigenous consultation and placemaking? Phasing and maintenance, does the design allow opportunities for phasing? And is the design mindful of the city's maintenance and operations constraints?
Okay, I think it's, is Mark there? I think you want to make the presentation.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Leon, do you have the slides on your side, or do you want me to share from my computer?
I think you can share from your computer.
Okay,
if
very
that's okay
good.
with you, Mark.
That's no problem. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're really pleased to be here, and it's an exciting day because it's kind of the day that this project as an idea gets launched into the public, and it's time for us to kind of hear and process and get the feedback and how it's received. Because typical with the competition, we're kind of in a vacuum, so we're left kind of without any kind of contextual touchstones to guide us along the way. So now that we're at this stage, we're looking forward to getting your feedback, and we think this is going to be a really great park, and we know that it's going to get even better with everybody's input and as it evolves between now and the time that we break the ground and start construction. So just before getting into the detail, I just want to present the team, and it's kind of a team with 3 feet. We have Claude Carmaine Associates doing the landscape design in the lead for the landscape vision. We have GH3 who are designing the lookout structure. And then our technical sort of support or associates on this is Arab, who will also be undertaking the construction management. Now, the Portlands, it's a really curious place, and there's not much that remains from what used to be there. It's kind of defined by this weird tension between the super heavy industry, kind of the heaviest industry in the city, across the street from some of the most sensitive emerging ecologies in the city. So it's a really weird place, but also fascinating. But one thing that was kind of interesting in looking at how the kind of history of the site is that the sandbar, the barrier beach that used to protect the Ashbridges Bay and once connected to the Toronto Islands, passes just about directly under our site. And so we thought, this is a kind of an interesting reference, a material reference to kind of try to restore the material of this lost landscape, and also kind of bring in the texture and the scale of a place that is separate from the oversized, surreal, brutalist industrial landscape, something that's more fitting for human scale. And so we figured this might be a really great place for kind of a beach surface, bringing back this reference, but also it kind of ties in with the materials around the area. This is an industrial area, at least to the north and the west. It's pretty heavily industrial. And this is industry that's not really planning to go anywhere for the foreseeable future. So we're going to be immersed in this industrial picturesque for quite a while to come. So we have the sand as a historical reference. We also have the sand and grit and the stockpiles of all these cement plants around us. So I think what makes it interesting is here's a chance for people to get a front row seat of this industrial activity in a landscape that's most of the time is off limits or forbidden for the average person. So here's a safe place to be able to, I guess, be immersed in this part of the city dynamic. But at the same time, and I think we see this at Sugar Beach where you see the sugar ships, it's become an interesting piece of choreography that adds some interest to the park. Now, what makes this neighborhood or this part of the city interesting, it's at the foot of the city, yet it feels like a place completely separate from the city. And I think that's part of the reason why industries has happened there, but also this kind of spontaneous ecology that's happened along the Leslie Spit. But one thing I think that we look at this kind of overall city view is this idea of the DNA. Part of the DNA of Toronto is this idea of the beach or sand. Sand is part of the substrate of the city. Something we in Montreal are really jealous of. You have this lake and you have ways to get into it, and we just can sort of dream about it. So we figured the idea of introducing another beach here, it's fitting to the Toronto typology, to the Toronto landscape. It's not an alien species that's being dropped in. We think that it falls into the larger framework of Toronto beachscape. But this idea of the Portlands as being far away, yet in the middle of everywhere, is something that I think adds to its appeal, but also its mystery. It's almost for people who kind of stumble across it or discover it on their bike or on whichever way. It's a bit of a secret that one has kind of fallen into. And we like to kind of maintain this mystique of the space. But one of the challenges, or I guess not challenges, but one of the I guess the challenges that we have to deal with is this juxtaposition that is part of the tension of the Portlands, where you have heavy industry on the left, on the west side and the north side, and you have this kind of really peculiar, unusual, but we're kind of rich biodiversity happening just on the south and the east. And so sandwiched in this is our site between the sewage treatment plants, abandoned power stations, big box stores, warehouses, everything here, kind of the heaviest of the city's features are located just on the west side, and some of the most sensitive on the other side. So how do we kind of work with this? And so Adam introduced this notion of the Leslie Street Green Portal. And we figure, is there a way that maybe this park can kind of do double duty? We're right on the threshold between this really heavy, intense urban condition and this really sensitive ecological condition. And as a unique position on this threshold, how do we create a design that can kind of prevent one from overtaking the other, allowing them to kind of exist in this precarious juxtaposition? And so maybe a few ideas about that is, one is kind of inspired by this paddock fence. You see it here that was recently installed, I think it was by DETA, around the northern edge of the Tommy Thompson Park. I think that's a really great detail. It's a barrier, but it's not a wall, it's not a chain link fence. And we figure that's a really nice design detail to kind of assert this as a public landscape and distinguish it from the industrial landscape just next to it. And then kind of, if you look on the Leslie Street Green Portal as it currently is built out, we have this row of kind of typical civic street trees, regularly spaced at a regular rhythm. And the idea to carry this along the city side, this kind of city-facing side of the park, along the diagonal, and then on the nature-facing side, providing an opportunity for kind of this spontaneous vegetation, more random planting to get established along this triangle and allow the Leslie Spit dynamic, the natural forces that are unfolding there, trying to give them a way also to take root into this Leslie Green Portal. And then another way to kind of create a buffer from the surrounding elements, but also create this sense of intimacy in a public setting, is through this creation of dunes. So that triangular part, if you look at the yin and the yang, sort of the soft portion of it, creates this intimacy, creates a buffer away from the city around it, and provides this setting for the park to unfold and be placed for singles, couples, small groups, and larger civic gatherings. And I think this plan shows it really well. We see kind of this kind of square portion, which is the heart of the park, and I think that's where we will emphasize heavy park uses. We've seen during the COVID time that parks are kind of a hot commodity, and a space that's not necessarily a lawn, but a beach that can withstand a lot of passive wear and tear. But kind of trying to focus that kind of heavy use along the west side, the city-facing side, and then all these kind of pathways that converge off of Leslie and elsewhere, converging almost naturally through kind of a natural wayfinding means in towards the square. And that leaves the other half. This is a large park. The geometry is interesting, but it leaves this triangular portion to be more of an off limits, kind of like when you go to a beach across the dunes. The dunes are often fenced off and protected as a no-go zone. And that would then be left for kind of a sort of these natural forces, these natural ecologies that are latent in the Leslie Spit, to be able to kind of work their way, have a bit of a stepping stone as they move their way into the Leslie Green portal. And this is kind of an idea. You'd have this rise and fall from the diagonal paths that come from Leslie Street, but this sort of natural fringe, this forested fringe, is a buffer that we pass through quickly. It's a gateway, but with the objects like this, the lookout building, the lookout structure, the silos beyond, the water and the beach, the destination for most people is going to be at the sand, where most of the intensive parts of the park use are going to be, minimizing the presence in the forested fringe. And once you get there, this is the kind of environment. It's a flexible open space that can accommodate a wide range of program possibilities. Now, just to kind of go over the plan quickly, this is we think this is an amazing site. It's a real gem of a site, but it doesn't need to be built out with precious materials. So just going over a list of some of the design elements. Here's the idea of that forested fringe, planted with indigenous species and kind of like a starter planting for the successional planting that's already unfolding throughout the Portlands. For the hard surfaces, we're proposing an asphalt, a series of asphalt pathways. On the west-facing side of these dunes, sloped towards the the slip and the beach, it would be lawned slopes for allowing long views over the water and the sand. There's the concrete lookout structure that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Permeable tree pits, so kind of the trees that are planted in the hard surfaces would be connected with silva cells underneath to the larger soil volumes. But also for those kind of as a mulch around, one idea is possibly to use the weathered rubble that you find on the Leslie Spit kind of as a small detail for those kinds of open pits. Direct bury concrete light poles, a concrete curb as a threshold between the beach and the asphalt plaza. Sand, some space for volleyball and larger kinds of activities. Maybe some gear-shaped platforms as a form of furniture. A wooden deck that allows accessibility towards the center of the beach. Bike racks, and then sort of swales to reinforce the permeability for stormwater management. And then, as I mentioned, the paddock fence, which kind of defines the line between the heavy industry and the recreational part of the park. Now, looking in section, an idea looking about maybe how we can minimize exportation of contaminated fill and minimize costs is to try and retain as much of it as possible on the site and use it to help build up the topography. So the beach, for example, would have to be excavated to meet the risk management requirements. And that soil could be used to build up the topography, on top of which we would cap with a clean fill soil as required by the environmental requirements, on which that would be planted the forested fringe and the other park features. And as part of this kind of aspiration from a stormwater management point of view is to minimize the reliance on a stormwater infrastructure. And at this location, the storm sewer goes almost directly into the Leslie Slip. But trying to retain that water on site and allow it to sort of be stored within the landforms and allow for infiltration to the site. Now, we do realize there are some constraints that we have to study further. What are the nature of the contaminants? That we don't want to flush them further into the system. And also, what are the impacts of high lake levels? Because we know that can sort of cause a bit of a backlog. And the same thing, what do we do if ever the wall is breached and we have flooding conditions? How can we maybe provide room for storage and maybe allow for park uses even when the water has maybe possibly breached the level of the dock wall? I'll just pass it on to Vanessa from GH3, who will speak about the lookout structure.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'll speak a bit about this small pavilion. We designed it as a lookout to the shipping channel and the surrounding Portlands. And it takes on a cylindrical form of a silo with arches carved out to indicate where the universal washroom is on the lower level and the maintenance room. And on the upper level to provide a 360-degree view. And the crenulated roof line of the structure is also a reference to the gear forms that you see scattered around the park. And it it's also a reference and response to the surrounding industrial landscape. The pavilion itself is 10 meters tall and 400 square feet. And it will be a landmark in the park to draw passersby to the central gathering hub and meeting point. And back to you, Mark.
All right, thanks. Oh, I realized my camera was off, so I'll give you a chance to see me speaking as well, if possible. Okay. Just a note about the planting. The planting kind of common denominator, or the base planting throughout the park, is taking its cue from the kind of the robust successional planting that we kind of observed throughout the rest of the Portlands. And for this idea of this forested fringe, we would populate that with indigenous species, kind of building upon the planting that's kind of emerged at the Leslie Spit, and creating a kind of a starter planting, so that over time, as a fenced off area, we would propose putting a kind of dune fence or sort of a protective barrier along the entire perimeter of these zones. As no-go zones, they would be left on their own devices to kind of hopefully become self-sufficient. The latent flows would be able to establish themselves, and maybe over time, without requirement of much maintenance, kind of succeed on their own, as with minimizing the interference from park users and other kinds of urban forces. But elsewhere, we carry the same kind of planting using possibly like cottonwood poplars and willows, but in areas which are more of the kind of the public gathering areas, increasing or enhancing the mood a little bit with other kinds of vegetation species, such as the weeping willows and possibly pines. And combine these not only help to create the mood of the kind of a relaxing beachscape, but it also, all of the species mentioned provide a kind of possibility for phytoremediation of the subsurface soils. And for that end, we're trying to connect all the soil volumes to have a good, robust mycorrhizal infrastructure below the surface and an intact moisture regime. Now, just one note about the rhythm of street trees we talked about earlier, and we propose carrying those through along this diagonal, the separation point between the kind of yin and yang of the park. And that currently is proposed to be planted with columnar poplars to give a kind of a regular rhythm, and you'll see a little bit of what that looks like later on. Now, for program, what makes the site unique is that it is kind of in the middle of everywhere, but also almost seems like it's a world apart. And it's a great place, we believe, to go be alone for a contemplative moment, alone with your thoughts, but also maybe provides a chance, a space to allow for larger, maybe louder activities that maybe cannot happen elsewhere in the city. And one example I'm thinking about is like Picnic Electronic, which we have here in Montreal, which is on Ile Sainte-Hélène in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. And this might provide a robust surface for that kind of activity to unfold. Other aspects that maybe from a program point of view, this park might invite is a venue for street art or public art. And looking at the silos on the adjacent sites, those could be invited to be painted or enhanced with kind of visuals that would influence the experience of the park. Possibly also opportunities for street food and food trucks to be able to come and serve the people that would be there, as opposed to a dedicated restaurant, which we're quite skeptical might be feasible at this location. And then one last thing on program about the dunescape, and if we keep the west-facing sides of those dunes covered in lawn, it provides a great vantage point over the beach. So it allows for chances for there to be kind of an amphitheater for performances, as well as maybe perhaps outdoor screenings of cinema. It allows for not only individual users or small groups, but also for larger civic gatherings to be comfortably accommodated. And again, trying to minimize the encroachment of those activities on the triangular portion towards the east of the park. The site is already serviced with infrastructure. Currently, this is the infrastructure that we have passing through the site. And so our intention would be to tap into this existing infrastructure and provide the site with the required services to accommodate voltage needs for performances, amplifiers, lights, whatever, and also hookups for possibly food trucks and other kinds of services, looking at the foresight of what the park possibly could be in the future. This is a view of the diagonal. I talked a little bit before about columnar poplars kind of augmenting that civic tree planting along the diagonal that separates the more natural side to the east and the more sort of publicly used park side to the west. And this would be the view that we would anticipate from the lookout structure. So we feel as a place that's called the Leslie Slip Lookout Park, with a very strong placemaking potential, this kind of prospect will become a signature moment in the Toronto postcard, and also provide a kind of a hotspot in the public imagination as a destination in the city. Now, there's one more slide before I share with you a fly-through through a 3D model of the space. But this is just a question about another beach, question mark. And I mean, people might be saying, deja vu, we've already seen this in Toronto. There's already 2 urban beaches at HTO and Sugar Beach. Why do we need another one? And I guess an answer to that, or a few answers, would be we've seen the other examples of this downtown, and it's a Toronto typology that seems to have really taken root. And not only is it a popular destination, and it's universal in its appeal, no matter who you are, your age, where you're from, it's a kind of landscape that everybody can have a relationship with. And also it's robust, it's not expensive, and it's also quite straightforward for maintenance and upkeep. So these are features that kind of make us realize this is maybe something that is suitable for this location, and it provides a really great opportunity for this relationship with the slip. And again, most of the intensive uses, passive intensive uses, as I've referred to as the say you'd see at Trinity Bellwoods, for example, in the periods of pandemic where you see a lot of people. This is kind of the center of that kind of energy, and everything else are like all the roads leading to that moment, allowing this to be that civic epicenter and allowing the rest of the park to be kind of off-centered, backdrop, buffer, and used for sort of maybe human purposes. Now, I'm just going to exit this, and I'm going to share with you the video, and hopefully it'll be streaming at a rate that won't be too choppy. Here we go, right here. It's about 3 minutes, and just see if the sound is activated. And here we go. This is the view currently that you see if you have a chance to break into the site, because it's fenced off currently, and get a view of the ship's channel. The length of the beach wall here is about 60 meters. And there we propose putting simply a tow rail like you see at Sugar Beach. We don't want to have any kind of high visual barrier between the water and the sand. The wooden deck platform acting as a threshold between this center gathering place plaza in front of the structure towards the beach. One of those gear platform seating objects in that plaza area. You can kind of see the rise and the fall of the pathways leading towards Leslie that kind of create the dune where you can see into the park, but it buffers out some of the heavy traffic that we see currently at the moment along Leslie. We could maybe consider adjusting the size of these, maybe to give more space to this forested fringe and focus the lawn areas where they are strictly sloping towards the west. This is where the diagonal at the north end meets Leslie Street. And coming in, and you see how the mound topography pushes Leslie Street away, and it directs the gaze towards the sand and the slip. And the slip continues onwards towards Unwin, and if we continue to follow that spur that's currently there, it could curve and become a gateway from Unwin to the south as another threshold into the park. Again, the second path leading towards Leslie is a kind of a crested mound that rises and falls, like you're going crossing the dune to go to the beach. The view from the mound, looking over the beach, lookout structure, and the slip beyond. And then to get to the lookout, here's a path at 4 or 5%, rising to the top of the mound, about 4.5 meters high. And here you can again get a sweeping view of the sand below and the slip beyond. A staircase as a secondary way to access this way from the diagonal below. a small bridge structure to get to the lookout, where we get a 360 view, as Vanessa mentioned, from this level. But we think the gravity, the pièce de la résistance at this moment is looking towards the skyline, down the axis of the slip. And it's positioned, the way that it's positioned towards the west, it faces, those amazing afternoon beach hours where the sun is shining at about 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock. This gives you that sweet time, perfectly positioned for that at this direction, and also provides a phenomenal place to watch sunsets behind the skyline at the far west. So that's the presentation, and we look forward to getting your comments.
Thank you very much, Mark. We're going to move to questions from the panel. I'm going to ask Nina Marie to go first. She has to leave at 3:45, so I think there's just enough time. Maybe you could ask your question and make a comment before you have to go, Nina Marie. I hope she's still there. No?
Well,
I guess
maybe
she had to leave. Sorry about that. Can I go to Jeff next, because he has to leave early as well, and then we'll go back in the order here.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, I don't really have any questions, at this point. I think, in terms of commentary, overall, I think it's a really nice design. It's an interesting plan. It's hard to sort of envision what's going to happen out there, but I think with sort of the philosophy of Waterfront Toronto and leading with landscape and starting to pull some more active animated uses out to this one particular part of the waterfront, I think it's a nice mix of amenities and features that we don't really see out there right now. So, I don't have a lot more to say at this stage. No real issues, emerging. Obviously there's going to be a lot of work with the environmental, the environmental study and making sure that the protection's done around the soil contamination. And I'm curious to see, I know there's a lot of work being done to look at innovative ways to remediate soil, which are interesting, and I'd like to see continued out there. But overall, I think it's a really interesting project. Thanks.
Okay, great. Fadi, can I go to you next?
Hi, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just have a really quick question. Do we know anything about the water quality in this area, or have you explored any opportunities of touching the water, getting close to it? I know that I assume it's not very optimal at this very moment in time, but in the long arc of our existence, or the project's actualization, have there been any opportunities for actually engaging and touching the water in one way or another?
I would say no. Currently, based on the experience at the other beaches, there's a sign saying "Stay out of the water" in the harbor. So there's a kind of understanding it's not really a place to be. I think the sediments are problematic and there are a lot of issues. But looking long term, I think there will be a day for sure in Toronto's future where the harbor will be swimmable. And I think that when that time comes, this would be a great threshold into the water for that. That'd be amazing.
Okay. Thanks, Fadi. Betsy, I think you have your hand up there.
Yeah, can you tell me more about who in the brief were noted as the users of the park? Specifically, how does this design, which seems to be kind of highlighted for people using it almost as a destination, respond to the future green portal design and function, and the kind of adjacent Tommy Thompson Park, and then the new Donlands or Don River Valley Park. My personal experience of this area is very much it's a passing through zone that needs a lot of amenity added to it and less of a destination leisure area. So maybe you could just describe the direction that you were given relative to the users and more specifically your response relative to this future green portal.
I think that the brief had some direction on that addressed like local workers. This is a local park for people to stretch themselves, stretch their legs, or to come out to from the surrounding sort of work areas, and also as a stopover for people coming on bikes and others passing through as you described. But I think we kind of decided maybe to go a little bit further than that because it's a serious, definitely a space or site in transition. And there's definitely going to be an anchor, destination anchor, once Tommy Thompson Park becomes more of a sort of becomes more on the map in the future as the neighborhood gets developed, the work that's happening at the mouth of the Don River. This is a neighborhood of the future. And so how do we anticipate that? And I think Adam had referred to, possible extensions of boardwalks on both sides of the slip that would then create two other thresholds to the park. So it's without a crystal ball to tell us exactly what it's going to be. It's hard to say, but we envision this as because there isn't an immediate neighborhood yet. It's someplace that could be a destination. And we've seen parks like that. Say, for example, Montreal. We look at the island; it's not connected to anything except there's a subway station, but there are no neighborhoods around it, and it is a destination park, which is both picturesque and naturalesque in one aspect, but also significantly programmed as a city amenity as well. So we took it a little bit further along that line with some foresight about the possibilities.
Thanks, Mark. George, I think you're next.
Thank you. Thank you. I have two questions, and one of them needs the site plan back. One thing I didn't quite get from your presentation, Mark, there's the park proper, and then there's a territory immediately to the south between the southern edge of the park proper and Unwin Avenue that you show included in the green space in some of your drawings. And I don't understand the relationship between what you're doing now on the designated site and your expectations for that further territory to the south. Is there a site plan that would enable? That's my first question. I have another question, but we probably need to bring up the site plan to be able to answer that.
Let me just bring that up. George, are you referring to this plan where we see kind of this intention of this kind of green wedge crossing over that piece of property just south of the site?
Yes.
Yeah, again, things are changing, and in the event that there's an opportunity for that site to turn into a public amenity, that would be kind of the intention or the vision.
But do you have a site plan that's closer in that would maybe not show that as green, but at least show it more what it's actually like? Or maybe one of the aerial photographs?
Let me go back to this one right here.
Ah, yes, that's it.
Right
so
here.
the roadway, there's a roadway just south of your south property line. Is that access to the aggregates operation?
Yes, that's Strata Lane for Strata Aggregates, correct.
I see. Okay, all right, so that answers that question. Then my other question is a more environmental one. I mean, given these two concrete plants in close proximity, is there a dust issue on this site?
I would probably, yes, there's dust coming off of those stockpiles for sure on windy days.
Should that be influencing your plant selection?
I believe, yes, I think so. And the idea of choosing a robust species that could act as a buffer to help filter out that dust, because it's not only dust from the stockpiles. Currently, there's a lot of truck traffic on Leslie carrying that, and there's a lot of dust and grit around. And part of the planting strategy is to create a filter to keep those out of the park and to help settle those out of the air.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. I think Matthew, I believe you're next.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Matthew.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have one question right now. Can you share with us your preliminary ideas about how you're going to approach Indigenous engagement?
Maybe I'll let Jen talk about that because they're
sure.
currently working on that outreach.
Hi, yes, thanks for the question. So we are kind of in the early stages of that. We're working through right now. We have Laura Consulting as our main public consultation engagement. We're also looking to add an additional consultant who focuses specifically on Indigenous engagement. So they'll be coming. We just don't have them on board yet. We're also working very closely with the Indigenous Affairs Office at the City of Toronto. And through them, we're also hoping to kind of start to identify some areas in the park and some opportunities for placemaking. So we may be looking at 2 different consultants that might be coming on board. Hopefully by the next time we come back to panel, we'll have those answers for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Eric, I think you were next.
Yes, 2 questions. Maybe if you go to page 8 of your presentation.
Hold on one sec.
Not a problem.
Can you see it there?
Nope.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hold on. I have to share this. There you go.
Thank you. So one of my question I have is in the early presentation from the from Waterfront Toronto, it shows like in the overall framework of the city that it's a bit to building on George's question about what could happen to the south, but that it also indicates that the city eventually sees Leslie Street as a green portal, that it would continue also north, where you would see part of it, probably a section of that parking lot. Has there been, as part of your exploration, as you develop the project, any thoughts in terms of how this, as a first piece within the context of that future green portal, how it would actually continue to evolve, integrate with those future intervention, and how that concept would continue to evolve?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So without losing what the essence of what you're proposing.
I think maybe we have to go back because I know that there has been some work on establishing the Leslie Street Green Portal near the Leslie Barns along this stretch. It's I think it was recently completed last year, and so that's one start from the north side, and I think you can't deny that the Tommy Thompson Park is going to influence how it's going to emerge from the south side, and I think our proximity is in a way bridging between those two. So I think as a planning move, it's identified, but the details are not for the entire length of Leslie Street.
Because the west side is also identified. The side where the park currently is, or is being proposed, the west side is also shown as as a strip there going all the way to. That's correct.
Yeah, though currently I think there's a parking lot that's occupying some of it here, and there's a lot of uses that are not yet aligned with that, I think. So this is a work in progress. Okay,
no, that's good food for thought, because it's something that I'll be commenting during the comment period. The other thing I was, the 2 things in terms of another 2 quick question. I love the idea of those food trucks, giving the context and all that. Where do you anticipate them to be when they come, they stop and all that? Where do you see them located within the area?
At the moment, we imagine kind of vehicles being able to come in off Strata Lane and enter the park along the diagonal, and then just kind of consolidate themselves in this plaza space at the threshold of the beach and the structure.
Okay, and the plan incorporates the whatever hookups, and sometimes they need some specific area that may include. Okay, the last question I has was giving the location and within the slip, there might be, I could anticipate that some small boat embarkation may actually come and want to stop there, and so that some access may happen from the water. Has there been some allocation for places for just to embark, to I guess attach both, or to and that might be a question for Waterfront Toronto, just to understand if that is an opportunity, or is it going to be accommodated as part of the future boardwalk promenade?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, there might be existing bollard structure to be able to tie boats to, but in terms of gangplanks and things like that, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Peter, next. Peter has to leave soon, so maybe you ask your questions and any comments you have, Peter.
Yeah, so I'm going to roll my question into my comments.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have to leave in 3 minutes. I think this is a fantastic scheme, and I applaud the simplicity and the elegance of it. In particular, I like the open space as compared to the dune green space and the separation from the traffic on Leslie. I think it anticipates the development to the south of a better connection to the Leslie Spit Greenlands. The only question I have, and this is also a comment, is about hygiene of the sand. I'm worrying about. We saw some stuff around cormorants a year or two ago. I'm worried about dog dew and geese. I'm worried about the viability of sand in this location without good maintenance and cleanliness. And I'm looking forward to the second presentation of this concept where perhaps you can address that issue directly. My other concern, it's actually, or my other suggestion, and it reflects an earlier comment, is there any way to get more engagement with the water? I think that this kind of abrupt edge. I realize there's lots of flotsam and other stuff in that kind of water, and it's not potable or anything, but there's parts of the waterfront here in Vancouver where they built underwater structures to attract fish so that people could fish, those types of things. I don't know whether there is any possible engagement with the water that goes further than the nothing that we got right now. So if, again, in looking at the scheme a second time, if there could be some idea developed for engagement with the water. The stunning juxtaposition of the bows of these freighters and the sand of the park and the people having picnics in the park, it is going to be quite dramatic. There's going to be some photo ops there that are going to be quite stunning, and we don't get that close to freighters like that very often. And then maybe one final comment was. What about picnic tables or something so that people who come there to rest and relax for a little while could have a little barbecue and a picnic rather than sit in the sand with questionable hygiene. So those are both my questions and my comments all rolled into one, Paul. I'm sorry.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Have a good day. See you next month.
Yeah. Okay. Ciao.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let's see. Betsy, are you available?
Yeah, are we doing comments now?
Well, we're still on questions technically. Peter took us to a comment. So if you have a question, let's do that and we'll wrap the questions up and then move to comments.
No, I'll just roll my questions into comments later.
Okay, we'll do it later. George, do you have any other questions? Your hand's up there.
Oh, I think it just didn't come down. I don't have any. I do have a comment, but I don't have any more.
All right, we'll go to comments there. Let's just finish off the questions.
I had a question.
Bridget?
Yeah, I had a question about whether there's actually a boat. There used to be a rowing club on the north face of the turning basin. It was actually there for a very long time. It was mostly in containers. And I guess I wondered whether there was any ability for canoes, kayaks, or smaller kind of boats to actually be able to access the water. The view looked like it was quite a distance between the water and the actual edge of the quote beach, and I didn't understand whether that was a possibility.
That wasn't considered in the design so far, but it's an interesting idea. I think it could be a phenomenal rowing venue. along the whole length
Yeah.
of the ship's
So
channel.
it was a nonprofit rowing club that actually was right across from where Toronto Hydro has its facility. So at the part where the turning basin is the largest, there's actually a green strip along, there's the sidewalk and then a green strip, and then you have the turning basin. And it actually sat on the northeast corner of that turning basin edge for many, many years. And so I guess it's a question. And then my other question was more about what is your kind of approach to lighting? Because I didn't really hear anything about it. There are a lot of shift workers. This is actually a really close park to my house, so I actually know it very well. And there are a lot of shift workers in this whole area. Just the TTC, the large postal stations, and all of the kind of stuff in this area. So I guess I just wondered what the kind of night vision is for the park that you might be thinking about at this stage.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it with very straightforward, simple park lighting, just illuminating from one side, aligned with the row of these trees to illuminate these pathways. And then, like you have at Sugar Beach with very low light levels, most of the lighting is meant to happen along the circulation ways and in the gathering space here, and everywhere else is left to be low light levels.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. Kevin, or you have any questions?
No question, thanks.
Okay, then let's move to, I believe we've done the round of questions. Let's move to comments. I'm going to start with Fatty.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, are you there?
I also received some comments from Nina Marie, so I'll
good.
read those after
Okay,
I'm done. Yeah, so I do, sorry, 1 second. My computer froze. So I really do think this is a very exciting project, and I you end the presentation by asking another beach. For those who spent the whole summer in the city and downtown will tell you Toronto is becoming this incredibly seasonal beach destination city. It's amazing how much people love these beaches and how many have gathered on them. And, Sugar Beach, HTO, Cherry Beach, that has become a sort of undeniable part of our public realm and our waterfront. So yes, 100% another beach, I think, is a really great idea. And also, I just wanted to mention that, even though while it might seem like it's a little bit of a destination and out of place, the amount of people who've discovered the Leslie Street Spit this summer is also quite impressive. The cycling highway going down Leslie towards the Spit has become, really incredible. People who've never even heard of it before the summer have, been flocking to it. So I would imagine that this would be an incredible rest stop attraction along the way. And I wouldn't be surprised if, just like, those kind of nightclubs that used to exist down in the Portlands where all the food trucks used to hang out, I will imagine there'll be a ton of fruit, juice bars and food trucks standing there waiting for the cyclists who are coming in and out of the Leslie Street Bit to stop in and, maybe grab a bite or something and spend some time on the beach. So, I can imagine this becoming an attraction and a kind of pit stop along the way. So I was also thinking in that regard that there might be a kind of preemptive working of thinking about cycling infrastructure and how and where people might be locking their bikes in a way that, just will work well with activities that are on down there already. I also spent surprisingly a little bit of time this summer out of the blue on that Turning Basin Park just to the north and west of there. That little strip of green on a summer afternoon was also really packed with people. And I have no idea how people got there, but it was really incredible. And you could feel like it's a kind of hidden little secret no more. So, the public realm in an area like this is really going to be extremely valuable and will become more and more of an attraction as the years go by. So I'm all for it. I like the pavilion. I think it looks really great, but I'm still not 100% sold on what these oversized gears are. I'm wondering if there's a better idea of thinking of their future iteration to be more integrated with, ideas of seating or benches somehow that are subtle, but kind of could, double as some kind of sculpture, but not fully be isolated from it. I think you're heading there with what looks like that in the renderings, but I would love to see further iterations of it. And last but not least, I think it's really critical to really think of ways of future-proofing this park for water access. I don't know what that really means, but somehow maybe not, swimming might be really far-fetched, but even some kind of docking system that you could envision, propose, and design that will ultimately allow us to touch and engage with that water will be really incredible. And I've seen amazing precedents of that in Oslo's harbor and elsewhere, where they're way ahead in terms of cleaning the water, but they've really designed a kind of public realm in which these kind of hard post-industrial docking space become part of a way for people to access the water. So those are my comments. I'll very briefly touch upon some of Nina Marie's comments, if that's okay. She sent
Go ahead. Yeah.
some messages as well. Nina Marie says, this was a wonderful, elegant strategy to activate and animate a part of the city that has long been neglected. So it's a really great idea. The cut and fill strategy is feasible and smart, and a way to bring back and experience the ecology of dynamic dunes, which are appropriate for the water's edge. She also thinks of it'll be really appropriate to find ways to engage with the water's edge in a different way and push for further embracing the embraced shelter of the ship channel for recreation and in the water, whether that be canoeing, kayaking, or other activities. She mentions that the planting plan is approachable and effective, embracing the vernacular and spontaneous emerging species, and yet entirely legible and appropriate to the place. It will be enhanced through indigenous engagement, perhaps the introduction of medicinal or healing plant and those native to the dunes and beach systems of Southern Ontario. Loves the project and thinks it's a very exciting and promising proposal. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fatty. Thanks for those comments from Nana Marie as well. Okay, let's go down the list here. Let's see. Eric, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I'll echo a lot of my colleagues' comment. I think it's an exciting, it's very simple, it's an elegant solution. I think it's also the beach is in the dunes very appropriate for the location. I think this is it's a place that really will set up the tone for the transformation of the rest of the envisioned public realm for the area. So I think that from that perspective, I think it's very, very exciting. I was asking myself a question about, is the structure in the right location? Should it be, shifted to the other side? But after hearing the, Mac's comment in terms of, the direction, looking toward the downtown, the sun exposure, the sunset, I think that is actually is also quite appropriate. I think the comments about future-proofing the engagement to the water in terms of if there's small boat activity, if there's kayaking, if there are people coming by canoe, being able to go and at some point touch the water, whether there is something that lets people come down or bring down both. I think it's something that is definitely worth exploring. The lighting, I think here, and Brigitte brought that up earlier, I think will play a very important role for the area. But I think too that there is the element of of the lighting of the structure, because we have a great view looking toward the channel, looking toward the west, but as the port developed, being able to maybe some lighting of the key structure of the structure that is being proposed, the lookout, how it's integrated, I think something that is definitely worth exploring to enhance the experience here of the park. As per Peter's comment, and it's something I had noted too, is in terms of there will be a lot of people there. The ability for additional, I think the gear and to sit on these gear structure is fine. But I think having the next stage of development is how do people eat there? Where do they sit? How do you position that around the space is something that would be in terms of for the usability. How do family come here and have event like that is something that should continue to be explored. One element that I think is worth is this is today a fairly isolated place in terms of the world is emerging around. There isn't really a lot of visibility from Leslie, and it's just because I'm just thinking just from just a safety perspective, because of the current context, should there not be and I know we want to mitigate some of the noise from the trucks, but having a peak, some windows, some areas that's from Leslie, you could see and have a hint of what's happening behind, because you don't really have direct view from Leslie right now. You can't really tell that, or maybe it's some key moment. So I think that's what be exploring, and this is also for enhancing potentially the safety. So having a view from the street, and it doesn't have to be the entire thing, but it might be key moment here that along Leslie looking toward, and also having the possibility to have a little bit of that view beyond that lets us actually discover the channel that is behind. So that's something that would encourage to be looked at, because I think a little bit more visibility from Leslie would be beneficial, mostly from a safety perspective, giving the context. And the last thing would be my last comment is with regard to looking at what the city envision in the future about the west side of Leslie, understanding that there will be some green corridor, green portal that goes all the way from Lakeshore to the Spit, future proofing the space in terms of and it might be perfectly fine today, but it's just understanding that how this corridor will continue to evolve, and then how the park gets positioned and is integrated in the future, or having just an understanding of how it would actually be positioned, integrated in the future within that greater green character of Leslie in the future. That is planned to be on both sides of Leslie. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Betsy, next.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for this great proposal. I have a slew of comments, so hopefully they'll all come together. The project really sets the stage for the future Leslie Green portal, but it also has to respond to the current situation and the users who are here, because it's really the first very public piece, aside from the small gardens that are lining the industrial piece on the other side of Leslie Street. There are so many cyclists coming down here. Like Bridget, I also live in this area. Thousands of cyclists, to the point where when you stop at a red light, there's a line of people behind you waiting to get through the light. It's very, very busy whenever the weather is good. And so this is really a great piece of cycling infrastructure. You can think of it very easily that way, in between, say, the Starbucks on Lakeshore and Leslie and the hot dog guy at the entrance to Tommy Thompson Park. There's nothing in between. Neither of those two places have anywhere for you to get off your bike and sit to eat, take a break. At the Starbucks, you're sitting on the pavement on the sidewalk, and at Leslie Street Spit, you're normally sitting on those like concrete highway barrier things that tend to be sprinkled around there. So it's actually a really important piece of infrastructure that we have going in, which makes it really exciting. For the Portlands at Waterfront Toronto, we've constantly been having this conversation about merging the industrial and the natural in a really overt way with the parks that are being designed here. And for this park, I see it in these kind of three or four objects. Whenever your office presents a park at the panel, there's always this really big, bold idea that's so overt that kind of drives the idea. With Love Park, it was pretty obvious. For Sugar Beach, it was like the pink umbrellas. And I think my criticism of this park really stems from the absence of this kind of piece that centers the park. It's not really the plaza. It's not really the beach. It's not really the hills. Like, everything is sort of just a very small piece of a collection of other pieces that are kind of situated in this area with that clear diagonal dividing one idea from another idea. So I think I'm kind of searching for the hook that is normally so totally overt in your office's work. The kind of the idea about the sand is that I think the success of Sugar Beach actually comes a large part from the umbrellas. That sand needs shade when you're passing through it. That it makes it a welcoming place for people who don't necessarily want to be in the sun. And at Ashbridges Bay, you get people bringing their only umbrellas because it's a big destination. You can swim, you can play volleyball. So it's kind of it's a odd beach to have totally open because it's not really a destination. And so it's not going to be used like a destination beach. The volleyball courts play a part of this. If it's just going to be the poles that you have to bring your own net to, with just the 2 courts, there isn't really a culture that's being created in the same way as Ashbridges Bay, which is not that far from here, where you've got, 100 volleyball courts, the juice places, like lots of food, and then you can go swim. So I'm not sure that program is the appropriate program for this location. The beach seems slightly unfinished to me because of these things. And maybe it's the potential of making something more of the wood deck, bringing it along the edge. I don't know. You guys are better at ideas than I am when it comes to parks. So I know that you can make something really amazing. My go-to example for shade and using of lawns and things is always the Ontario Place Park, where on a really hot summer's day, there's nobody in the lawns, the flat lawns with no shade. And people are kind of on the hillsides, on the rocks, underneath the shade trees, because it's a great place to sit. And so if the hills are going to be the shade and the seating, I'd love to see maybe the gears or some of the other motifs of the park accommodate seating now, so that when you're there on your bike, you get off, you lock it up, and then you can bring your lunch or just go sit somewhere. If you're not, usually wouldn't bring a blanket potentially biking to Leslie Street Spit because there's nowhere to put that out either. So maybe think about how people are going to sit. I know that's been said before. At Love Park, you have those great benches that ring the mounds, and here it's sort of like access to the mound. Is the grass going to stay clean from the dunes, the forested dunes that are letting to grow wild that could potentially infect it with seed? And that seems like a wonderful thing. So how are you going to maintain these areas for sitting if those are the seating areas? I mean, like I said, this is bringing up so many questions as opposed to answering all my questions with a motif or a really strong idea. I think that maybe I'll just end. I don't know if I got through everything, but I really support food trucks. Like I said, it'd be great to have something in between a Starbucks and that one hot dog guy, and that safety discussions are hugely important. Please continue to explore these ideas. I personally almost never use Toronto parks after dark, just because I don't feel safe usually. So if there's a way that you can make an evening cycle down this street really welcoming, that would be amazing. And I'd look forward to using it. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Betsy. Go to Bridget next. We good?
Yep. So first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate the strength and simplicity of the scheme. It's a tough site. It's actually a very windy location. And in a way, I feel like you are providing a very interesting response with your forested fringe to ameliorate what is actually an extreme condition. I guess for me, I would really love to see a section that actually starts at the water's edge and goes all the way to the allotment gardens on the other side of the Leslie Street, because I feel that the kind of the mounds, the height of them actually are really critical, because they're balancing both the safety and visibility issue that Eric spoke about, being able to be on Leslie Street and look all the way down the shipping channel would be pretty great. But also the height or the slope of the mound becomes pretty key in terms of really creating a kind of microclimate in the area of the mounds, and also as a protection for the beach itself. So I feel like that calibration, and then the benefit of being able to encapsulate the soil at the same time. So I feel like there's a, so I appreciate the competition entry and what we're seeing here in terms of the cut and fill. I actually think that the actual final shaping of it kind of is going to be key, because you have such different environments, the kind of linear Leslie Street with all the trucks, the allotment gardens, which is a whole other community on the other side. So I feel like it needs to do a lot, and a lot of it is the precise shape and the kind of angle and how it's actually planted. And I trust you guys will do a great job as you develop this further. And then I just want to kind of underline the issue of small boat access to the water, which I feel what's so important is that you don't actually access the water at the Leslie Street spit with a boat. The way of the rubble of the edge condition, it's just a very different thing. Whereas the shipping channel is actually very protected, and which is why the previous rowing clubs and things really gravitated to this area. And I just think that it would become a kind of amenity. So it's almost like thinking about along the waterfront, there are these fingers that stick out into the water, the wooden ones that we've seen for quite some time. Maybe this is something that runs parallel to the water, but actually gets you closer to the water's edge, which I think is a really key point. But I think the concept is super strong, and the approach to everything, I think, is totally in the right direction. And as we develop, I think it'll only get better and better. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. George?
Right. I have two suggestions, comments, and one is a suggestion. First, I just wanted to, actually three things now that I think of it. I first want to endorse Fadi's observation that this is not too many beaches. Sugar Beach and HTO are very far away. Cherry Beach is closer, but I think there's lots of room for this particular one, and that it would develop its own beach constituency very easily, as I had the impression Fadi was already pointing out. So that's number one. Number two, I was kind of struck by Betsy's little bit stream of consciousness programming narrative. And I would just like to endorse that. I mean, I think there are lots of things to think about there that could flesh this out further. And then lastly, my suggestion is I was very interested in the assembly performance function. And I was going to suggest that before this comes back to us, could I suggest that a comparison be made of this space for that kind of program activity in relation to the big lawn that Michael van Valkenburg is developing for the park on the Inner Harbor? Because for big outdoor performance events, coordinating activities between these two wouldn't be crazy, even though they're not all that close together. And it would be interesting to know what their relative capacities for, crowd assembly would be. I just think that would be informative when we see it next. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, George. Matthew? You have comments?
Yep,
Matthew?
I do. Thanks, Paul, and thank you for the presentation. It's going to be a great space, and it's moving in the right direction for sure. This spot is really important. It's situated in between Ashbridges Bay and the delta of the Don River, which is historically a very abundant place for life, biodiversity, and it's one of the reasons why we actually live in this area. So I think it's really important to always remember that. And I think you guys are doing that with your comments on the space for non-human purposes, which I really like. And I'm assuming that's kind of the eastern side of the park. And you started to talk about the water ecology in there as well, which I thought was could be a great process, which I think is the next slide here. Thinking about how you can start using the site to be not only just park space, but infrastructure to help clean this mess that's been made in our portlands. So maybe pushing it for a little bit further in that direction might be difficult with the contaminated soil, but that's something that I think is really important to not only talking about place making, but place keeping. This site was a place for thousands of different types of animals and species, and humans have now taken it over, and we need to make place or keep place for the animals and species and rain and water that was already here. So I would really push you to think about that as an extra layer to this park. I'm a little worried about your consultation process at this point. I'm worried that it's not started yet, and I think that you really need to dive into this with Indigenous folks here in the city, and think about it as relationship building. Don't think about it as a check mark that you just have to go in and speak to people and then you're done. Really continue the conversation with them and keep them as part of the process, whoever they may be, from the beginning right through till that park opens and continuing on. You can see Indigenous people using this park for programmatic elements as well. So I would encourage that relationship building. I would encourage you to do that with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and I would also encourage you to do that with local service providers here, executive directors, or appointees by the City of Toronto. The last thing I'm going to say is I'm echoing Bridget's conversation here about lighting. This is going to be a beautiful spot for watching the sunset. So thinking about what happens when that sun goes down, twilight, and then what lighting starts to happen in this park is something that I could think it can make it very magical. There's a point in time where you could start lighting things that are lower, as opposed to just thinking about a transient kind of overhead light. Think about how the park could come alive when that transition happens. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I believe Kevin is the last person who hasn't commented yet.
Thanks very much. No comments. Really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think that captures everyone. So, boy, a lot of great comments. I'm going to try and summarize. And I'm going to start off with, first of all, I think Waterfront Toronto appreciates the opportunity to build a good working relationship with Quay TO. And I think this is a great project to do that. Second, I'm familiar with this place as well, and I think it's a very unique spot in Toronto. If you stand, say, on this proposed sandbar and look to the west, it is a magnificent view down the ship channel. And as someone said, in the sunsets, it can be quite mind-boggling. It's a very unique perspective that I think people, once they discover there's something there, they'll want to go there and see, feel, touch, and experience a new piece of Toronto. So that's critical. Also, there's a ship in the imaging that's been shown, but nobody's mentioned yet, and I'm aware of this. There is Toronto's only dry dock right there. It's a floating bathtub that big boats can go in and they sink it down, and then the ships are repaired. And that is completely a unique experience in Toronto that most people have no idea exists. I think a general question that many people have raised, and it's a great one, is basically, what's the big idea behind the park? What's the culture of this place? And I think that needs to be answered in a very direct, critical way, because there's a unique opportunity to provide those answers. One of the features of that area is obviously industry. There's the concrete campus there. There's the ships. There's the 24-hour sewage treatment plant. There's the TTC on Leslie. It's a very industrial place. And it's also quite wild. And I think those elements of the character need to be captured in trying to answer what that big idea for the park might be. In terms of more specific comments, many, but I'll just try and group them here. Basically, people love the concept, and they love the idea, I think, of the sandbar and the green component of the park. Various questions about how specific elements of it are going to come together, how they're going to work. But one of the, I think, very useful suggestions that I believe it was Bridget made was it'd be very helpful to see a section right through the park from the water's edge to Leslie and over to the allotment garden, so we can understand how all these pieces work and how they fit together. And also integration of the park into the Leslie Green corridor needs to be expanded upon. In terms of the actual opportunity to engage with the water, I think many people made reference to that, and I would certainly support that. I think the fact is, you're not going to go swimming in there yet, but the reality is, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be little docks or something on the edge of the sandbar where people could, paddle a canoe, a kayak, a rowing activities, etc., for very small boats that could come right up there and access this park from the water's edge. Another idea that I think we should think in the future is, one of our earlier visions for the Inner Harbor is the possibility of Inner Harbor small little ferries like you see in Vancouver and Victoria. And I could see this being one of those little ferry docks where somebody would get on, a small Inner Harbor ferry and go to the island, sure, but also maybe come to this place as a destination. So all those opportunities should be there. Another comment about the tremendous volumes of people, I'm aware of them, the cyclists and the walkers that go to the Leslie Spit throughout the year, but obviously especially in the good weather. And I think this will be a very busy place. So it has to think of how it's going to accommodate, a lot of people who want to stop off there, get something to eat, something to drink. As many people have said, where are you going to sit? Perhaps a little barbecue, all those kinds of functions. And it should be thought of as part of that cycling infrastructure. Some suggestions made about the lovely idea of the lookout, but perhaps explore different alternative designs, more symbolic of industry of the area. I leave that as an open question, but I think the concept of the lookout is very strongly supported. In terms of the lighting and safety, the 24-hour nature of the place. Generally, people don't go down there at night, but I got to think of the future. And I would love to know how many thousands of workers work at TTC, the concrete campuses, and the sewage treatment plant. I bet you it's huge. And they don't go there now because there's not much to do. But I think that's a potential clientele, I guess, that should be accommodated in the future of this park. And therefore, lighting is very important. Another couple of comments I think that I'm going to add in here is obviously very important. The comment that Matthew made about the reference to Indigenous consultation has to be really pushed, I think, quite a bit, because I think references to the historical, not only geographic history, but the Indigenous history of this area needs to be really researched and incorporated into the potential for this new park. As you said, there's an opportunity to make a place, but also to keep a place. So the opportunities for infrastructure and water quality need to be thought about as well. And maybe a final comment, I'm trying to capture them all here, is this is going to be a place where could be some unique outdoor activities. And it'd be nice to sort of understand what the potential is for that and how that might relate and be coordinated with other places along the waterfront. Again, that's where this idea of the little ferries might even come in. So I hope that captures all of the comments. I've tried to summarize them fairly quickly, but obviously there's strong support to move forward, and we all look forward to working with you and can't wait to see this come back. So with that in mind, there is no vote because it's issues identification, but there's an opportunity for the applicant to respond to what you've heard. And I guess, Mark, I'll turn it over to you and see if you want to share anything with us.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. The comments were excellent. It's just what we needed to kind of push this into the next level. And we look forward to coming back with hopefully a lot of these issues addressed and and see how this place will become even more dynamic. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. We can't wait. Okay, it is just after 4:30, so we're pretty well on time. So unless there's anything else, Chris, you want to raise, I'd officially bring this public session to a close, and I believe we're going to go into camera for a short period after.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. Leon, is that good?
Yeah, that's good with
Okay,
me.
so I'm adjourning the public session. And for those of you who can stay on to deal with an item in camera as directed this morning, please stay on to join us. For those of you who have to leave, we understand.
Well, have a great night, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Vanessa. And thank
See
you,
you later.
Jennifer from Create.